Hey, Daddy Bear eats plants. What's up? Trying to get a discussion going here. Do you tend to find people are logically inconsistent? This is a tough one. I see it as there's two different methods. One method of logic gets you to a conclusion or gets you to an answer or a solution. Another method is what you use when things are uncertain. And so I think the second one people are really inconsistent at. I don't think people know how to apply logic in uncertainty. I think that generally people think logic is just the first tool, the one to get to some conclusion or get to some solution. And I think that is the inconsistency. They're misusing the rational method as far as it goes towards understanding and empathy, those kinds of things. If you use rationality to get yourself to a conclusion is a very different method than if you use it to understand or empathize with someone, or to check your own assumptions, right? Falsify your own beliefs. And I think that is very inconsistently used. That method of being humble, being willing to check your own parameters, and being willing to empathize with your opposition, not many people use that method. There are lots of irrational people out there. I agree. I think it's like an evolutionary problem. I think slowly but surely we're adapting to this thing called logic in us, or grasping at it, right? Trying to adapt to it, trying to use the tool and practice using it. But it's a long, slow haul. The practice isn't instant. I'm challenged to. I struggle to fully embody this, right? I'm not perfect. I have problems with it as well. So it seems like we're trying to tap into this thing called rationality. None of us really like have it or hold it fully. I am always malleable to others' opinions and will correct myself or look at my ethics and improve. That's good. That's a green flag. It's just sometimes, like, for instance, if I'm on the battlefield or something, I don't want to use necessarily like rational, detachment, right? I want to be grounded in my own strategy for defense. So that's what I mean. There's like different approaches to using logic. No one wants to have a conversation with a dishonest person. The thing is I think I give most people the benefit of the doubt that they're honest. They want to get to the truth, although I know that some people don't. But the problem is that when we conversate about the truth, it's frustrating. I want to get to the truth, right? And I want to speak honestly. But then the moment the person who's I'm engaging with sees differently than me, then I either have to relax my own assumptions or just assume that they're dishonest, right? And this is where I think the problem comes in. I think most people are trying to act towards the truth. They just don't realize how limited that practice is. They're not humble in their approach. When they paint a painting, it frustrates them, right? When they try to get their ideas across to the opposition and then they hear the interpretation of their position, that frustrates them. They don't have grace for their opposition. I take it you've never debated veganism. Hey Chris, how's it going today?
Oh, good. How are you?
I'm really good.
A whole new level of asshole. I told someone today that their face was just fine. It was their personality that was the issue, because they were just like a Russian doll and full of themselves.
Who is this you're talking about?
I don't know who it was. It was someone on some live. They got on my nerves so bad. I just got in the box to tell them that. I don't know where that came from either. The devil made me do it. Oh.
That's the best.
Oh, God. Yeah. And it wasn't really an insult. I mean, I did tell them their face was just fine. It was their personality that was the issue. They were just like a Russian doll and full of themselves. So
Classic.
It wasn't as mean as it could have been, but everybody laughed and then I just dropped.
That's the best.
Yeah. How have you been today? How's your weekend going?
Good. I worked really hard yesterday. I had a good day yesterday. And this morning I got up and sold something on Facebook Marketplace, which is a good start to my day. And yeah, I'm going to get out.
Awesome.
It's raining. It's always raining here lately. It's kind of a bummer, but
yeah. It's
winter
always
in
raining
Vancouver.
somewhere.
Yeah, this city's particularly like entrenched. I'd rather be in rain than snow, but when it's weird because like 0 degrees. I've talked to you about this with you before, I think, but yeah, like 0 degrees and wet is way colder than like -10 and dry.
Yeah.
Like it gets cold here, even though it's 7 degrees Celsius. It's still cold just because of the the humidity, temperature.
Yeah. Hold on 1 second. Okay, sorry. My mom was texting me. She's like, I need a big book map. And I'm like a paper one or an app? What are you talking about? Everyone has maps on their phone. If she writes back and tells me she needs a paper map, I'm gonna fucking die. She's losing it. Oh, okay. Yeah, she said a paper one. Hold on.
It's crazy to think that we used to drive with paper maps to navigate, and now if I use my phone to navigate, I'll get pulled over. But it's like, okay, I'll just use a paper map then, if that's what you'd rather, as if that's any safer. Like,
oops, hold on.
Road map up on my dashboard as I'm trying to drive, navigating myself.
Okay, sorry, Logic. My mom called.
Oh my god, don't be sorry at all. Don't be sorry at all. I'm the one who's supposed to be entertaining.
Oh, whatever.
Shit.
Yeah, I understand that. Yeah. Fixing.
Here we go. Wild coming up. Hell yeah, Wild. How's it going today?
Yo, I'm doing okay. Doing pretty okay actually, despite everything. Whatever.
That's good to hear, man.
Just working out some of my fucking reviews as of late.
You're always fairly what would I say Wild is? You're always like in the problem solving stage. I feel like you're always like you get to a level and then you're immediately questioning and moving right on to the next. A lot of people are like uncomfortable with that, but I appreciate that about you. You're always willing to kind of like be mobile.
No, legitimately, like how familiar are you to Heraclitus?
10%. I know the name, know a little bit of the reference, but I haven't really looked into him much.
Okay, so like one of his quotes was, a person goes to a river, and if he returns to that river, he's a different man. I'm butchering the fucking quote, but essentially the idea, like, the river.
Yeah, I've heard this quote. I've heard this quote before, I think.
That would describe my personality to a T.
Yeah, what is the quote? It's something about, yeah, you're a different man every time you return to the river, something like that. It's just saying that there's no, just like how the river's always in motion, so are you kind of thing, right? You're always aging.
Yeah, but the thing is, the river doesn't change. The river's identity is The idea is everything is always ever changing, but the fact that it always changes in this pattern, it's still the same.
Right, the identity of the river doesn't change. Right.
Exactly.
Very interesting. Yeah. Yeah, I see that through you. I definitely see what you're saying.
That would describe my personality to a T. Yeah, um, so like right now I'm just working out uh, I was working on okay, I've had spiritual experiences. I've like pretty sympathetic to this belief, like, and what have you, right? And I'm like, okay, what if I actually did believe? And I'm kind of just like having this whole ass rabbit hole about information, knowledge, and what have you. So yeah,
Yeah, I definitely struggle with this too because I mean, other people's interpretation of the history or of the problem might be different too. Like I might incorporate something that's a little hard to talk about because I might see it differently than most people, whether it be, my philosophical or religious views or whatever. These things are so personal that at a certain point communicating about them becomes a little bit and you got to be a little bit like I don't know, graceful with it or like willing to be not heard.
that's why I start with um philosophy or like stuff like that. Um, my friend Jordan and Dream both talked about like information theory, and I'm definitely integrating that into my view as of late. I also send Dream of Dawn. Okay, I play around with ChatGPT as well. So like sometimes I ask it like how to build an ethical framework with these aspects or information or what have you, or with these philosophers or with these fun facts. And I also ask people like, hey, give me your fun fact, give me your favorite academic person, give me your favorite story, or is it a favorite story? Maybe if it's a mythology, if it's religious, give me a favorite character. If they have religious, give me a favorite deity or character within mythology, and then just ask its ethical framework and what have you. So like, I decided that to give a mathematical proof for for paganism and animism, and I sent that to Dream. I'm really curious of what he thinks about it. Yeah, so like I'm just playing around with newer
Send
ideas.
it send it to me. Is it in your Discord? I'll check it out.
Yeah, it's on. Um, do I even have your Discord?
I'm on your Discord.
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah. I can definitely I'll definitely send it to you. Um, but yeah, I have like all these other different shit. I even asked it like, hey, what is Loki's if Loki was a philosopher, what his philosophy would be or stuff like that. I'm just playing around with it, and what have you.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool, man.
It's I
What when you say you start with philosophy, I guess like part of the deductive method that I see is like getting rid of everything that's questionable and finding the foundation of our beliefs, right? You went to philosophy for that, which I find interesting because I'm similar. Like I noticed that my patterns of belief related to a foundation of logic. If it wasn't rational, then I wouldn't believe it. And so diving deep into philosophy and how logic really like operates gave me clarity on my beliefs.
Mhm. Yeah, the thing is though, right? If I never learned about pragmatism, I would have never considered that logic would would have an emotional component towards it. And
Okay, interesting.
that would never have me spiraled into this direction at all. Also, you can check out. I kept saying this to everyone, but like, check out Rogue Atheist response towards my other account. She has like resources on order to back that claim. But Essentially, like if I never realized there's an emotional component with logic, I would have never gone down this road.
Yeah. I saw her videos. They're really good. They're really good, and I like how you linked it to the pragmatist view because I do think that it's a pragmatic view. I suppose there's other ways to label it, but the pragmatic view, I love that. It is very pragmatic, and I don't know if like historically logic would have been used outside of pragmatism very much, like especially the further you go back in history, I think it becomes purely pragmatic, right? Like its foundation or its origin, whatever logic is, wherever it comes from, kind of seems to be related to the pragmatic. I don't know what else we would really relate it to.
Okay, so speaking on that and speaking on history, right? Do you know P.F. Young, Jung?
You mean not Carl Jung? Carl Jung?
No. Okay.
No,
P.F.
this is a different one.
Yeah. P.F. Young is a guy on YouTube, right? And then like he is a pragmatist just as much. And the whole reason why I even know about it, by the way. Uh, um, he went in and talk about how we view history, right? And then he would say, and then I think he's right on this because like all history is just a mythologized pieces of events in order to have this narrative for people to follow, right? And
Right.
then I would probably agree with this. There may be ill intent with that technique, like whitewashing history or what have you, but like it is still a function of society to do that. You can see, and I would probably argue with this in the sense of like with the Bible, where like when the Hebrews are crossing the river and what have you, that never happened. Some scholars would probably argue is from a local legend from, maybe not local legend, but in their locality, their Mesopotamian society was there and what have you, with these mythologies that where there is proof of them crossing a river towards a specific area that I forget which. I think maybe Egypt. I don't remember. But the point is like that is in of itself mythologizing history in order to provide a function for their respective society. Again, it may be, or it definitely is, whitewashing or history washing for a specific group to an extent, obviously. But but is there really a difference between history and mythology if you just use it to um, create a narrative?
Right. No, I mean, we can try to, that's a, right. To the degree that we are attempting to alleviate the mythology, right? History tries its best to alleviate the mythology, but then the narrative just continues on. It just becomes more condensed or, more edited, but it doesn't really change the fact that there's this narrative component. So I don't know if you can ever escape that circularity there.
I mean, you can maybe escape it in, well, maybe not necessarily escape it, but mitigate it a little by, um, okay. So like, I promise you this is related. So at the Big Bang, right? Um, if you take any point in space, okay, hold on. Let me simplify this. Right now on the celestial map, if you take any point of space, it would look as if those points are the center of the universe because of how everything's where everything is viewed as expanding, right? From that point. But the thing is, you can do that with any point on the celestial map. So, and if space and time is the same thing, right? Then all those points are technically the center. That means all of time is expanding in every direction. So I think it's useful to see events that happens on our planet to a certain extent in more realistic ways, obviously. Like what affects us, right? So, for example, we take the point of America, and we're going to see all these necessary effects we do with the world, and see how those effects are triggering certain um, dilemmas within America, right? For example. So we can take a point and see all these events happening all at the same time. I think that's a very good way to mitigate, at the very least, very biased mythologizing of history. Did I talk too much?
No, you didn't talk too much at all. I was reading Daddy Bear's comments here. It says I'm not an astrophysicist, but I don't think that's true. Um, is it just the? Is it just the? Is he claiming that the any point could be considered like the center is not true? I mean, on a sphere, it's true. So we could just look at the globe, right? Any point is the center of the globe. There's no, you know, way to differentiate different parts of a true sphere.
To be clear, it would be very much on the perspective. It would look as if that is the center.
Yeah, we would need a more like geometric idea of, I suppose, the universe, because I guess, I don't know, if we understand the shape of it, we could assume that it's sort of just expanding in all directions equally. But I don't know. I'd have to talk more about that. Yeah, like I don't know if there's a possibility that certain other parts, right? Because like other parts of space could be warped, like a black hole compared to other areas. So I don't know if they are like spread evenly. I don't know if the space and time is spread evenly like that.
Um, I cannot really speak to that, but if you know
Me neither.
Astro, she is, I believe she is an astrophysicist. But I do know she's a scientist that definitely deals with space a lot. And she's on here, and she's the person who talked about it in one of her videos.
Okay, there you go. Well, there's the reference, and there you go. Yeah, regardless, I think that you're right, that it's I guess a useful idea, right? It's a useful concept to think of things in this way.
Yep. It would be definitely helpful to avoid, like, very much biased mythologizing of history where it's only going to be described by the winners versus versus trying to narrow it down towards just a specific group, you know. So it definitely,
Yeah, decentralizing the narrative, kind of. Totally. I still get bogged down in syntax. Daddy Bear says, yeah, it's like a primitive science, like a Earth-centric model compared to heliocentric. Yeah. This idea of like syntax and how it relates to reality. I'm not really concerned as much with materialism and physics as I am with just basic syntax. Why does syntax work the way it does? And I guess, where did it come from? How did we have we? I don't even. Well, I don't think we've fully understood this idea of syntax and like how much we are tethered to it as our fundamental reality beyond physics and beyond materialism.
fair.
What is that noise? What is that noise? Sounds like you're doing a science experiment or something.
That's either my stomach or my voice or whatever is going on downstairs. Anyways, what what was I saying?
Sure, you eat something.
I'm okay,
If
Chris.
that's your stomach, that's crazy.
You can cause yourself to get stomach ulcers and other digestion problems if you don't eat when your stomach tells you you're hungry, bro.
Okay. I've eaten. Okay, it's just digesting shit at the moment. I don't even feel it right now. What the fuck was I about to say? Oh, I remember. Logic. You have to remind me on what syntax means.
Oh, sorry. Well, you could say, yeah, I know. This is what I don't really even have a word for validity. It's this like structure of logic. Validity. What is validity? It's the structure of the argument. It's not the argument themselves. It's not the substance. It's not. It has nothing to do with the soundness of the argument. It's the validity. It's the pure structure, the form of what is true or possibly true bearing has a
see.
specific form. Why? It's like very interesting to me that that is the case.
see.
How is it so that we are restricted to these specific symbolic forms and that those seem to be related to like our emotions? Like harnessing those tools seem to be related. If you're unaware of how the syntax works, I feel like you will be frustrated by your own thoughts. You'll ever forever be confused and frustrated by your own thinking until you can really, we call it spirituality. We call it, right? We call it like, oh, a presence of mind or ability to self-reflect. Like there's all these ways of kind of talking about it, but I think it's just simply the rational method. There would be this commitment to syntax and this commitment to not forming sentences that are harmful and only sticking to the true or the rational sentences, something like that.
I see. It's like trying to study why an argument ends up being sound, or why an argument ends up being valid, and why we're
Yes.
holding to those rules. Gotcha.
Yeah, why it ends up being valid. Why it ends up being valid. Like, because you know how everyone talks about modus ponens? Do you know what that is?
Mm-hmm.
It's it's this basic inference rule that talks about validity. It shows validity, and what it says is if A then B, and then it says A therefore B. That's more. So let's run through. Do you kind of understand that or not at all, or like what's your level of understanding of that?
I think I have an idea, but I think the problem with me is that like I can only see arguments as either sound or unsound.
Yes. So that is what the problem is. So exactly. Okay. So wow. Let's stay there for a second. Remove all soundness, and now just represent that with A and B. So assume it's sound, right? Assume the argument's sound, and rather than getting into the details, we're just going to represent the soundness as A and B. And now we're just going to look at the structure of validity. Literally all it's showing is if A, then B. The structure is purely this conditional. It has an if in front of the whole thing. If it didn't have that if, it would not be structurally sound. You literally have to put some sort of conditional in front of the argument, in front of the sound argument, to make it valid and falsifiable and verifiable. Isn't that interesting? To me, that is.
Fuck.
If is required, like the whole point of validity is to look at the form, not the arguments. So how can we not notice the word if, right?
Right.
The word if is the very first conditional that modus ponens.
If is the detrimental. It's
What
the
do you
detrimental.
mean, Chris?
It's imperative. It's necessary, the if. Without the if. Think about without the if.
Well, what would happen is you wouldn't be able to validate it. There's another thing called a universal instantiation. There's another thing called a universal instantiation which removes the if. So that's like something when I just say the sun is hot. The sun is hot is considered like valid and true and everything. The problem is it's implying the fact that you can verify the terms, right? If you and I don't know what sun and hot mean, then we have no way of validating or verifying these terms. So the conditional is still implied. It's this ability to verify and validate. A dogmatic person doesn't have that. They put forward A and B in a way that without the if. There's no if, there's no humility to be falsified or verified. Their syntax is actually wrong. They just put forward the sun is hot, and they don't understand that without being able to check their terms, this is just going to be a frustrating process of communication error.
Fuck.
So like these, you know what else is interesting about modus ponens is it doesn't matter what language you use, right? It's not for English. It doesn't matter what language you use, right? It's just a statement about symbology.
It's very interesting, isn't it? All of these
Oh
things
man,
and the way that they help us convey our thoughts.
unbelievably interesting. Also, how this is tied to history. Like, what does it mean to have this syntax emerging culturally? And if it affects culture, it affects our society. Cultures that adopt this system seem to be, I don't know, more tolerant, more reasonable, more moral, I guess, ethical, right? The dogmatic red flag societies we see are the ones that absolutely do not adopt this system of conditional reasoning or rationality. It's dogmatic thinking, ideological thinking.
Because they never actually practiced it. That's the issue.
Well,
Very
and it
much
gets
so.
into, you got to get into the habit of it, and I think a lot of people don't practice it because they've never engaged in any type of depth of conversation. Logic control, were you in there when some of the Filbros were arguing about meta? It was the funniest shit I've ever fucking seen. It was the most
No.
Filbro thing on this app.
When was that?
About a week ago, maybe a week and a half, they were arguing about what meta was. It was fucking funny as shit.
Oh my gosh.
I
Okay.
was like, I've never seen more of a Filbro conversation in my entire life.
No, this is, and I think unequivocally that what scares people, or not necessarily scare, but what that makes philosophy annoying to some people, right? Like, we have like science to describe metal. Why our Filbros are talking about metal, right? And then this is something that I sent Jordan a video of this dude talking about just talking about the fact of basically arguing against statistics and kind of just, and I sent that to Jordan, and then he was like, yeah, this is like over applied philosophy, like it's over applied in this notion to the point where like it's just ignoring the actual data in of itself. So like this is kind of what drives people away from philosophy and think it's useless for that reason. And I think that also has a feedback of like people just not using logic or any form of epistemology outside of science because with philosophy it's just abstract shit and it's just pointless at this point. What point is there to listen to that? And then you also get into the weeds of them finding out, oh shit, science changes, there's no stability, or whatever other else of government lying, and they kind of just lead into the situation of like, okay, yeah, I can't trust no one, I'm just going to learn whatever random shit I can in order to explain my predicament. So, yeah. That's kind of like, yeah. So it's always everything.
Last night, I got into like this conversation that ended up being like 3 fucking hours on the live with Daniel and Smug about philosophy and about original or semi-original thought and whether or not people can have original thoughts. What do you think about, can people have original thoughts?
We're not okay. I don't think we can at the moment. I think at the very start of the human existence, yes, we had original thoughts, but those original thoughts were not necessarily complex or accurate. But like now,
Okay.
I don't think we have original thoughts.
So
I would say
this is the argument we got
it depends
into.
what you mean by original. I would say we all of our thoughts originate from one single thought, but they are all original in the sense that they're derivations from that original thought. Branching out.
Well, the argument that we got into was Landon ended up coming up there and saying that the only original thought a person could have is that they exist. Like, Kristen exists. Me realizing that I exist or acknowledging that I exist would be an original thought. And I don't know how I completely feel about that, to be honest with you. But another argument that was brought up was, what if someone had never heard one of these concepts before? And they thought of it without ever having learned about it or heard about it or anything like that. Would that be an original thought for them? Because while other people may have heard about it, if they've never been exposed to it, would that be an original thought? Like, and then it was said, think about like the Sinhalese people, that tribe that cannibalizes people that no one's had any contact with. If one of them comes up with one of these deep philosophical arguments or thoughts that they've never heard about or never experienced, is that an original thought?
I would still say no, only because, well, it really depends, but only because of like their social structure, like of noticing, oh, this situation is bad. Oh, why do people do X, Y, and Z? I think people are too quote unquote contaminated with information of other people to even say there is an original thought would be making no sense, because all our thoughts are just data being collected, and then our neurons are just firing to a point of that data collection.
But that would mean let me think about that. Give me a second.
I can't see how someone roaming and experimenting with their own skill set that has been previously taught to them to derive new conclusions or realizations or observations isn't original. Like, if I develop a new trick on the skateboard that no one's ever done, that's the definition of original. Of course, it's coming from all of these previous tricks. I'm standing on the back of giants, but nonetheless, the new budding leaf is original. It's its own crystallization of the pattern of the seed of the tree, right? Like, every snowflake is original, but it's all H2O just crystallized.
But that would make every thought that we had an original thought.
I would go towards that. Yeah, I would lean towards that. I would say more likely every thought we have is some original. It's like it's because it's related to the origin, right? It is related to the original thought, which is this origin of thinking. And if they are related, then it has also this own original aspect to it, right? The relationship, quite literally, to the origin is its originality.
So, okay, so the process by which someone achieves the thought is what makes it original.
Interesting. Well, I would say it's the thought itself, but I suppose you're right. It's the process too. But I don't know. In my head, I'm using the example of a new skateboard trick. If I go out there, I can see how I'm standing on giants. Everyone else has developed an ollie and a kickflip. But if I go develop a brand new trick, I've truly developed something original. If it really is original.
But if we're holding to...
I think the process by which you got there matters as well, but that's just me and the way that my brain works and the way that
and the thing is, if we're holding to processes, we're just back to square one, because processing that information would entail that you would collect information out yourself that's already there.
Why? So, what process, just to wrap my head around this, do you think would be necessary, Chris, for like a skateboard trick? Because, like, let's say someone's just a complete noob, doesn't know any of the tricks, to kind of go back to your other example, right? Doesn't have any awareness, doesn't even know the name of any of the tricks, and then just happens across their own, like, trick. And then everyone at the skate park is like, "Wow, this dude's doing something new and complete original." And he's like, "Oh, I just enjoy doing this, you know. I've never. It was because of the fact that he didn't really have that previous method or the previous like skill set that people were teaching him how to do it that he actually did come across this original technique. If he would have been taught an ollie, if he would have been taught all of those previous methods that every other skater used, maybe that would have limited him in coming across this originality. But that's only one very rare case. Most cases are the fact that you do take the traditional ways of like improving, right? There's only so many ways to stand on a skateboard after all, right?
I guess so. I mean, you could stand on your hands, but you're gonna die.
And that's still not original, right? People have done that.
Exactly. Yeah,
But
I mean, yeah,
but there
absolutely.
but like when you
Yeah,
this complexity, the first person to step on a skateboard did something original of its time. So there's this tangent, there's this connection to time, right? And where the origin comes from. Like, is skateboarding not original because maybe it's related to surfing somehow? Like, and we get kind of bogged down in this inability to use the word. We lose the meaning of the word
Yeah.
original. But I think if we tie it to like time and innovation, it gains meaning again, and we can see that like the origin, that's how things are connected to that original thought. There's back in the day there must have been one original thought that happened, the original first thought in humans, and we all have been since then deriving our thoughts from that first thought, I guess, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and if you look at the spiral of it, I think even that first thought that led to others having thoughts is what we could call. That's why the method matters, in my opinion. Does that make sense? That's why
Oh,
the journey
the
to that
first,
thought is what matters as
yes,
well.
yes, I do see what you're saying there.
This
Absolutely.
is reminding me of a video that I came across. I forgot the name of the freaking video, but basically, it was a human talking to existence itself about what's the purpose of a life or what have you. Like, what is the grand narrative? What is the what have you, right? Existence just simply say existence is. But like when he explained it more succinctly, what he replied with is that you hold your own story uh, in this grand tapestry of the universe. And the weaver, which is you, impacts this tapestry with other weavers, with other peoples with their thread. And what stays internal is not you specifically, but what stays eternal is your impact of your
The
thread.
fabric,
Yes,
the overall fabric.
yes. Is your thread affecting other people's thread, which then impacts the entirety of the fabric or the grand tapestry of
That's
existence.
beautiful. I love that, man. That was really, really sick. That's beautiful.
But this is also why I don't hold to original thoughts. I original thoughts just doesn't make sense in my head. If anything, it would be more apt to say, within my opinion, more of like a unique thought with what's already been done. And I that's more apt for me. I just don't see originality. I just see unique mixtures of different ideas.
Yeah, we're getting into a semantic dispute about this word original versus unique, and I could go along with it. I guess my tension comes from the idea that somehow all thoughts are related to the original thought, and that relationship must be in this creative.
Yes, exactly, Data Bear. Exactly. Unique perspective rather than original perspective. original perspective makes no sense to me. I guess you could say there is an origin of new, unique perspective, but not the perspective in of itself is or original.
Yeah, I see the problem. I just can't detach the relation. What would it mean to have something that's related to the original idea? It seems as though the only properties of the original idea are this creative component of originality. Uniqueness isn't enough because what is the original idea? Well, it's related to this ability to create new and original ideas. That's the idea. So if you are relating to that, then it demands creativity, right? It demands the creative process of something original and new. If you didn't do that, well, then you would just be relating to other ideas, not the original idea. And I think in all ways, all ideas are in some way related back to that original, innovative idea of creative thought.
Yeah, but I don't think using the word unique takes that away.
Yeah,
Because
perhaps not. Perhaps not.
because the thing is, and this is also with my new appreciation with history and opinions, which kind of bolsters this point. But I also thought of this back in middle school and high school. For me, it just seems as though all we're really doing is taking all different data and different data from other people, and then okay, how about it's more apt to say this, right? There's this video, I forgot his name, but basically his video was basically this, right? The rundown is you've met so many different people that sees different versions of you in their own stories, and they're all different versions of you, but you're still uniquely you within that grand scheme. And this is all to say is like just hold different pieces of each other. Just as much
So,
I'm
but
holding.
but 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 is this to say that there is no original copy? Because
There is,
I would say there demands an original copy of that.
well, here's the deal, right? Let's say there is a paper of specific information that holds data, right? And then I combine that with different information with data, and that holds a different, new, unique data of information to provide a different way to problem solve. And you can do this with basically anything. Like I mentioned, I'm not sure if I mentioned to this to you guys, but I've been playing around with this idea where like I take a person's favorite fun fact, I take person's favorite academic person, I take a person's favorite story, I take a person's favorite character. I switch story out with religious text. I switch out the person with either a character from the Bible or deity, depending on the religious belief. But I combine those with ChatGPT in order to find out an ethical framework. And this is basically taking different sets of data that this person experienced and giving new data in order to solve different problems. And that's all different uniquely, but all those different data is still from other ideas. And that has been a combination of different data from other people. And you can just go down to this long line of web where there's no original thought, but all unique thoughts coming together, having different perspectives and data, and making new data from that data in order to solve different specific problems or disputes.
So how would you just say, like, you said it there as far as thoughts go, that original thoughts don't exist, but how would you like define the word original in general? I guess I'm not trying to play the semantic game. I've lost meaning of this word, I guess. Original. Like, what does it mean?
I would say I feel like origin would be very specific in context. I guess I will say this. There is no objective origin of anything. I just think when it comes to the pragmatic use of the word origin, we just simply just refer to something that is uniquely fresh and new.
Well, okay. Let's talk about it in terms of data collection. Like the origin would just be the center of the graph, right?
And that's what I'm saying about pragmatic usage, right? Like this is the origin point of this XYZ, but there is no over-encompassing origin of anything. So that origin point would still need to be from something or was there for a specific reason.
I mean, not only okay. So the argument is like, not only is it there, the specific reason that it's there is because of a juxtaposition of two differing terms, two terms that we can juxtapose against each other in the x and y axes, right? In order to derive some sort of meaning, in order to derive some sort of so that origin point. I don't know if it makes a comment about like originality in the data, but I think it does make a comment about originality in the function.
Yes.
The function
yes.
itself.
There's originality in the function, but there's no originality within the data.
Right. And I don't really entirely know what that means, I guess.
I just don't think there could ever be such thing of origin of anything. Just everything just be unique. We can argue within the functional use of the word origin of like something that exists was at this specific point within these specific paradigms. But that's it. But there's no like a priori, or maybe I'm using that word wrong, but there's no like objective origin of anything.
But like, okay, when I think in terms of like something like velocity or speed, right? We plot time against distance to get the person's speed, and so the origin point is just like the 0 point of time, right? And speed, where the graph just shows no data, I suppose. And so like, I guess now I'm trying to think. Well, I guess like sorry, go ahead.
But remember, right? Those are specific paradigms for the graph's sake, right? That is not necessarily the car or the person's or time's actual origin overall. That is just using an origin as a functional use in order for you to map out the speed of the car and what have you.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
but there seems to be some infinite regress to the possibilities of derivatives and how we can continue just layering these multidimensional, right? This multidimensional data, kind of what you're putting together with. I could take your favorite story and all these things and put them together to build an ethical framework. It's like, and then there's a new collection of data skewed towards this other agenda that I have of ethical frameworks. And so it seems like once we have speed, right, then we can calculate further and further dimensions of reality that are tethered to this original function of origin and like how functionality works in general, which is this like juxtaposition of terms. Like the origin, again, and its relation to the original thought, like while we're thinking, we're relating back to this original idea, which would be this juxtaposition of terms, the axiomatic ability to collect data in a functional way, right? That would be somehow symbolically what's represented by, I think, like syntactical validity and like the rational method in general. The only way to collect data is to have some formalized origin of meaning, origin of measurement.
So when it comes to like plotting those things on a graph, though, the graph does continue before where you choose to start. So if you like take your velocity, so like speed, distance, and everything. So if we're going to like base one of our axis on speed, we can say that actually at the original point in time, speed is going to be 0 for every point before where we choose to start to take our measurements. So is that actually the origin, or is that just where we choose to observe it from?
Right. I would say no. The data is not pertaining to the origin, but the juxtaposition of terms itself is the origin. I don't think there is any data we could collect on because what the origin is actually referring to, from my perspective, is just this juxtaposition of terms, this rational method to be able to compare time to distance and derive this concept of speed. That's the origin. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's my thought.
I'm just trying to work out other ways in which you could say that that's not really the origin. It's just where we choose to observe it from. So it's not an original point. So
well, I would say the observation. I would say that the origin has no observation tethered to it. It's unobservable because it is just this like juxtaposition of terms.
What do you think, Cage? I'm curious.
For some reason, I don't have a mute button. I feel like I'm missing a lot of context here.
Well,
Like a great deal of context. I heard ethics mentioned. Yeah, I don't know if I can formulate an opinion.
okay, I can just give the rundown. My case has been there's no such thing as original thought overall, just different unique thoughts. And I'm just simply, and then I use the example of where I use ChatGPT, I ask people's favorite fun fact, favorite story, favorite character, favorite academic person, have that set data, and then that creates new data for solving different ethical frameworks, and it kind of just lead down to this conversation about the origin point. That's essentially the rundown. Of course, I agree there's functional usage of the word origin. I just don't think there's such thing as an actual origin.
I don't think original and origin are the same thing, because I would use original and unique the same way. If I say somebody has an original thought, I'd say they have a unique thought.
You've cut out, Cage. You've cut out.
Did I? No. If I said I had an original thought, I'd also be able to say I have a unique thought, given that thought is specific to my mind.
if we look at the original or the term original, and we look at things like music, the original things would be the sounds that were made. So we have only a select number of notes that can be played at different tempos, but eventually we're going to get to a point where we have exhausted every possible combinations, and then things are just going to be a remake of things that have come before. So they stop being original and therefore are less unique. But it doesn't stop them being unique, but it stops them being original.
Yep.
No,
Yeah.
I don't agree with that either. There's so many notes. If you add even just the bass notes without sharp or flat, that's 8 factorial, 7 factorial. You're never going to run out of combinations. I don't think there's enough songs in the universe that are
Eventually you would. So if we look at, say, we got a shaker of dice and we had 100 dice in this shaker, and we could roll all of the combinations, but eventually we'll get to a point where we've run out of combinations and we will just continue to produce maybe them in a slightly different order, but they're still the same combinations of notes. The same combination of dice faces.
Well, 100 factorial is a number that's incalculable. It would take you millennia, if not more than millennia, to do that.
Yeah, so we could use AI supercomputers, or if computers hit singularity, they'd be able to calculate this a lot faster than we would, or if we were to actually commit to the action. But if we were to look at it in a hypothetical basis, it is entirely
there's over
possible.
80 to some number over quadrillion notes. 82.5, whatever the fuck is 2 over quadrillion.
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing with your principle that, sure, On a long enough time
A
frame,
centillion, maybe. I don't know.
every
Yeah.
combination of notes will have been exhausted. But then you
At
just
some point, it will happen.
Hmm?
In a hypothetical scenario, at some point it will happen. We will have used every note
Okay.
in every
So,
combination of
so,
notes.
but here's the important thing that I'm struggling with, and I hope I make sense here. Like, music's a great example because you're looking at it analytically, right? But think about how impressive it is for people to just do a great cover song. People practice years just to interpret someone else's song perfectly and play it, and they play it 1,000 times, and still it's never quite the same as that original song, right? So there's this element to music which is participatory, and I think that relates to thinking as well. There's this element to thinking which isn't just analytical, there's a participatory element to it, and that is what I'm trying to say is related to the original thought. When we go back and we think about historically the original thought, I think that would be something like a juxtaposition of terms, which is creative in its essence, similar to music. The participatory requirement for thinking and music alike demand this creative component, which not only flourishes in uniqueness but also originality. Like the very fact that the relation, right, to the original thought, what is that relationship? What is all my thoughts right now? How are they related to the original thought? Well, in its originality. That's the only way I could have a relationship. Otherwise, there's no way for me to relate unless you guys can help me out of this. There's no way for me to relate my thinking to the original thought historically without this essence of originality. What else would be the relationship if not a creative and participatory, property?
I don't know. Nor do I know how this relates back to ethics.
Ethics.
This is an example about data.
What does data have to do with ethics?
Again, with my ChatGPT thing, it was just people having different forms of information that I randomly mixed together to see what their ethical framework was.
Yeah, like
And
he
it
was.
was just
Yeah.
basically about them having different ideas being mixed together, creating this new idea.
So he was trying to ask some questions like, what are some of the questions? Like you said, what is your favorite story? What's
Favorite
your like?
story, favorite character, favorite fun fact, and favorite academic person.
So trying to build basically an ethical model out of these, I guess, what would you call these? I don't know, like preferences.
Different forms of information. Well, like because I do hold to the story holding like some moral truth to an extent, so like that's why it's added there. But yeah, just different ideas from different places, just randomly mixed with and then just asking AI to build an ethical model out of it, and then that's a new idea, and which in turn be new data to process in order to see its applications.
So you used. Was this moral data? It sounds like you just asked them preferences.
I just asked, yeah, that's essentially what I was doing. This is just like, and I do hold to like whatever they see within their mind from their corresponding upbringings or what have you would be still considered data in a sense.
I just want to draw an analysis here from, a metaphor, I guess, from what I was saying earlier. Maybe this will help flesh out a little bit of what I was saying. Like the idea of skateboarding, right, is this creative process. When people start skateboarding, yeah, they want to learn tricks, but ideally you want to create a trick, right? It's this whole idea of maybe if you get good enough, you can invent your own trick. And so although all tricks are a derivative of some other trick, almost every movement in some way is original, right? Every single day the weather's different, you're skating a different obstacle, and every single motion you do is original in its execution. So I don't think there's a way to really escape originality, and I think I would lean more towards the other thought, which was that every thought is original. Pretty much every thought is original. I know that this is somewhat unrelated to what Weil was getting at with his data collection thing, but I do find it interesting, how we build ethical frameworks in this data collection model as well. I guess these two things are somewhat unrelated. I forget how we connected them together, but I just had that thought come in my head that maybe the
It
skateboarding
was it
thing
was the fact
paints a
that
picture.
it was the fact that they collected different forms of information that's amalgamized together in order to create a moral framework, right? So that's the same thing with your skateboard thing. Is that like he has this trick, but that trick is built upon by different forms of information that he already.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, and so like locating the original trick or the original data point might not be impossible or might not be possible like under these methods, but that's not really the point, right, of the data collection to begin with. And it does seem like all data points, I don't know if we're using the word original correctly, you guys are saying are unique. You're saying the data points are unique, but I'm saying I would also push on this idea of originality, I suppose, too. It's at least related to the juxtaposition of terms, like how are we collecting this data? Your idea to collect the data on all your examples, like narration, favorite character, all those things, that's an original collection of the data. Now we go forward and observe the data. So, it's the juxtaposition of terms that is the actual origin or originator of the idea, the data, the uniqueness in the data, something like that.
I think we should just go with the fact that everybody's fucking stupid except for me and a few of us.
I'm down. Okay. Where can I sign?
It just
I'm
seemed
down.
On the dotted line, I'll send you a contract for not being stupid. You get one, Cage gets one, Bart gets one, Shark gets one. There's a handful. Chester, I think everybody on the panel gets one. But there are a few people that don't touch
You
me,
get
God damn it. Don't
you get a contract. You get a contract.
Everybody gets an intelligent contract except for stupid people.
But yeah, I struggle with this word original. I guess I have a tension in me. It's like, how could a skateboard trick not be original? If it truly is a new trick, someone does some crazy shit that's never been done before, or just breaking a world record or any of those things. I see how those records are on the shoulders of giants, similar to the music example. No one can really create the claim is no one can create original song. There's always some interpretation of 4/4 time or some or 120 beats per minute, right? There's always some sort of like I don't know, consistency or pattern, harmonics, what chords are in harmony together, those kinds of things, they don't change. But each somehow the fact that these complex these complex cultural phenomenons like music and talking and thinking are so nuanced and complex, I would say. Because they're so complex, there is room, I'd say, for originality. Like a tree is all coming from the same seed, but every leaf or like every branch is original in its sense. It's its own. It's not just unique, it's also seems to be of origin. If maybe I'm linking those terms incorrectly though.
I think you're linking those terms incorrectly per se.
Yeah, it's just that I just have this like I just reject the notions of original of that word. I just feel like it
Right.
puts
Cage,
I feel
do
like
you
it
think that there can be original
romanticizes-
thoughts, Cage?
I think it just romanticizes people's new ideas. That's all. But that's just me.
Well, you could twist.
Do you think that we can have original thoughts? I'm wondering because I know that you have a different perspective about knowledge and all kinds of other things, so I'm just wondering if you think we can have original.
You asking me?
Your name is Cage, isn't it?
Yeah.
KJ? You want me to call you Cage?
I was brushing my teeth. Do I think people can have original thoughts? No, not in the realm of like meta ethics. No.
See, I would say the fact that everyone has their original thoughts and that thoughts are by principle original in essence, that would make me closer to a skeptic or a nihilist, because we would have no hope of like understanding or knowing, right, anything. But if we all share the same thoughts and there's some underlying consistency to thinking, and it's all just sort of unoriginal and maybe unique, but deriving from it's all just basically this unoriginal variation. Well, that seems way less like, I wouldn't be skeptical of that at all. That seems like knowledge and all those things are way more attainable.
Yeah, the only reason I say that is because it's not with like epistemology. You can have like a new framework with that, especially in like the contemporary space or continental space. What I'm saying is like for metaethics, like there's really only two main schools, and then there's like three subsects for one of the schools, and then there's two subsects for the other. And usually any new modern thesis falls within one of them. It doesn't always fall nicely, but you can always put it under some like umbrella. Like one that's pretty new is like Hume's view on morality, which is moral realism, right? So he'd be more of like a natural realist, but he wouldn't describe himself that way given his commitments. All he would do is just say that there are some independent of mind moral facts and stop there. But he usually indexes those to some phenomena that occurs in nature. And Ayer, the popular scientist, I think he was a chemist mainly. He didn't think like moral phenomena could be true or false. So that was like the first newish view in like the last 200 years. But I don't think that somebody in the next 100 years is going to come along and say, hey guys, you forgot a category.
But but you're not saying that categorical thinking is related to originality, right? Like, what is the originality under your framework, I suppose, or like, how do you understand this term?
Yeah, just like the category from which a thought begins. And I don't think a thought can.
That's so great. Okay, but what is the category? Like this thought. Oh, that was such a good answer. So what is the category of thought which makes it that of origin?
Yeah, just like first of all, you're gonna have like it can be really trivial and just say like, well, you're thinking ethically, so the category in which you're originating your thoughts from is from a ethical bias. But that's too easy. What I'm trying to say is more, I guess, substantive. I'm saying, look, if somebody comes along and maybe they're a layperson and they propose some solution to some ethical dilemma, that which is unique or maybe fresh, just not written in words that would be clearly associated with some previous established theory. I'm saying like, well, we can just reword it or take the principal commitments and attribute them to some previous category. It's like my moral theory is more of a non-cognitivist ideal, but that's just given the commitments. And no point in my view do I commit myself, at least rhetorically, to that principle.
Okay, interesting. Like colloquially, you use it. Well, how would you use it? What would be the best example colloquially?
For like my moral position?
No, of like something that's original. It's related to your moral position, though. We're seeing how it's related here. But
it would just have to like have no previous commitments of anything. And
excellent. You're saying it for me, and then this is a crazy conversation. Okay, sorry, keep going.
It's fine. You can just have no previous commitments to any prior like propositions. So if somebody came along and I don't know, said like, hey man, like similar to like compatibilism, right? With like free will or choice discussions, there was determinism and libertarianism, and then somebody, the Stoic, came along, Chrysippus, and said, hey, I think I'm going to redefine free will in such a way it's compatible with both. And that was a new commitment, a new proposition nobody had ever considered before. So if somebody were to somehow come along with respect to moral facts and say, well, I think it's a mix of both, I think it's incoherent, but they propose that, then that'd be an original thought.
Yeah, colloquially, but not categorically.
No, it would be a new category because it wouldn't be anti-realism, it wouldn't be realism, it wouldn't be any of those subcategories.
Sorry, but I meant what you were relating to previously how we could just reference these new. They're not really. You wouldn't use the word original outside of colloquially, right?
No,
In
I
that
was,
context. Yeah. So okay.
I might say it's new. That's fine, or
I
like
know.
fresh or whatever, but certainly not original. I don't think philosophers in the analytic tradition have been original since, I don't know, maybe Nietzsche or
Oh, but you
perhaps
now are
people
using it
there.
like so you can relate this idea of original back to like the original idea. You think there was like an original thought, or do you think even that was some categorical sort of infinite regress?
No, I think there was an original thought. I think
You
Plato
do.
was innovative. I think Kierkegaard was innovative. I think Hegel was innovative. I think Wittgenstein was innovative. I think all these people are innovative. I just don't think they're, or I just don't think anybody that precedes them is original at all.
Yeah, yeah, it's this tension between, see, this is the tension. It's like what differentiates, what's the symmetry breaker between uniqueness and original? That's the crux of this conversation at this point.
Well, I mean, semantic dispute aside, I think unique is just trying to say like um, this is has some extra commitments. So maybe expressivism, the non-cognitivist thesis, is going to be new compared to emotivism because expressivists make a further commitment that the emotivist doesn't, but the expressivist is still committed to the prior propositions that the emotivists are, in the same way that any Neoplatonist writing any sort of new extensions of the Platonic thought is going to be committed to Plato's original thesis, but then just add on more stuff. So unique is just
Exactly. Yes. But to just add on more stuff, see, that's what's kind of like, I'm trying to use this skateboard example to ground it because it's hard to differentiate in some of our cultural expressions of things what exactly is original and what is unique, right? Like an absolute noob who has no skills on a skateboard could do something unique and new just because of their unawareness of sort of the etiquette of how to ride or a skateboard or whatever. But then to come up with a like an actual right like expression of self through the skills of skateboarding and in this unique and original way is it seems to be its own category. It's like beyond just mere, oh, that was unique, that was weird, that was different. Beyond that, it's something actually original with its own flair and style and consistency. There's something there that's tangible, you know. And I think what the tangible thing is how it's connected to originality itself. How are we going to say something's original? Well, it's this expression of it's this expression not only of uniqueness, which would be like variation. It's this expression of individuality, right? Like there's no copies of it, like a snowflake with just that one variation in crystallization. Even though there's billions of other snowflakes, there's no other snowflake that's exactly like that one. That's the
Yeah.
original component.
I think it's like maybe a park rider. I don't know, goes street for a day, and they do some like weird fast plant into 270,
Exactly.
like can lander. Yeah, that's like unique and it's new. But this is where I got confused on the ethics talk because I don't think that's good. Like
Exactly.
like
Yes.
anybody that can like just throw together some like I don't know, they might go to the park for the first time and like I don't know, jump a box and land can. Like that's new maybe, but it's like okay, cool. That wasn't like good. All you did was like move your right leg over your left.
Exactly. And they could do some weird, they could call it some weird, they could do some weird roll around on their back, like the Australian breakdancer. That's a great example, too.
Yeah.
Right? Right. So, okay, so I think that somehow this quality pertaining to origin has to do with the appreciation for a juxtaposition of terms. If you're going to be unique, all you need to do is create new terms. If you're going to be original, you have to take terms that have already been developed, maybe add a new term, but now you have to use them in a way that's actually referential. Why doesn't the Australian breakdancer work? Because she's not referencing actual breakdancing moves enough. She does too many unique things that aren't quite right referential. Dancing is a very referential thing. If you want to get props, you have to do a move or maybe update a move that's already been done and show off how well you can do it. Not in just a way that's just your own move, right? Just too many of your own moves starts looking not like breakdancing.
Yeah, it'd be some new. It's like some new category. You might be considered. I don't know, maybe some tap dancer if you do too much weird shit.
Right, you start tap
That
dancing too much.
Australian break dancer was an insult to white people. Quit playing with me.
Well, not only white people, just breakdancing in general, right? Like, it sucks because breakdancing isn't really goofy like that. It's actually quite athletic and awesome, and like all the other contestants really showed how sick it was. It doesn't look goofy in highlights. There's no way to make good breakdancing look goofy in a highlight. It looks freaking badass, right? It's the sickest. It's the sickest fucking shit you've ever seen. Like, so that's why it's cringe, because in order to be a break dancer, you have to reference these certain moves that were already deemed as impressive and the foundation of breakdancing. If you don't appreciate any of those and you just do your own thing and call it breakdancing, that's where the cringe factor comes in. So it's the same with data collection. It's the same with ethics. I think in philosophy, there's this element of references, right? Where we're referencing and then evolving a certain foundation from which we can grow, rather than just shooting in the dark and trying to, right, hope that we grow something out of just the dirt without actually planting seeds.
Right.
Yeah, but that's why that's why a lot of anti-realists like me, or anybody else who commits themselves to some excluded thesis of another, that's why, like, you'll hear often, like, maybe it's not actually rhetoric, it is kind of substantive when they say, I don't know, maybe Chris says some normative fact. Maybe she says, like, I don't know, stealing is wrong or stealing is immoral. And I might have the same conclusion, so I might, like, agree, stealing is wrong. But I could say, if she was a more realist, like, I think what you're saying is nonsense. And I think it's nonsense not because of the conclusion, but because of the way you're indexing that conclusion. In the same way, like, a break dancer would say, well, what do you mean I have to wear, like, tap shoes? That's nonsense to me. Because they don't have any sort of reference for tap shoes being included in their repertoire, in the same way that I don't have any reference for independent of mind moral facts.
Yes. Now, interestingly, if a breakdancer put on ballet music, there would be some juxtaposition there possible where an original idea could happen. Now, that's probably been done, so it's not truly original, but there's something about, putting on the tap shoes perhaps could be another way, but it seems like there's these ways to, like, there's more pragmatic references and less pragmatic ones. The tap shoes seem like non-utilitarian. It doesn't seem like you're going to get much out of putting the tap shoes on, whereas maybe the potential of putting on, like, orchestrated music to breakdancing does have more potential.
Right. Yeah, it's also complicated, isn't it? And Cage, I am leaning toward objective morals. Quit playing.
It's just like the objective morals seem foundational to, like, the operation, whereas there's still room for the subjectivity, right? There's still room for us to dance to different genres of music, but the moment you put on tap shoes, it's like, well, now to call it breakdancing, it's almost like begging the question of, like, well, what's the point of putting on the tap shoes, right? Like, why it seems like postmodern to just put them on to be just to juxtapose things.
Okay.
In general.
So I think we should put World War III on hold for a minute, because I know I probably just started with Cage, and just let it soak in, Cage. Just absorb.
I've been absorbing more realism for some time. I don't hate the view. It's just, like, I don't know, recently Lance and Humor, or Mike, whatever you want to fucking call him, they had a debate about that. And like, the opening statement from Humor was like, okay, well, let's run down the lists of, mind-dependent moral facts, and he went through cognitivism, non-cog, and then error theory. And I think he did an overall inadequate job of A, characterizing the views, and B, objecting to them. But it's not really fair, because whenever he presents his view, I also just find it to be either descriptive of some natural fact, trivial, or perhaps redundant is a better way to put it. So that's why I find moral realism to make no sense. And it doesn't make sense because the words are there's he's speaking gibberish or something. It makes no sense because for someone to say you see this option, you see this brought up a lot, well, let's just say moral or independent of mind ice cream selections exist. And maybe you go to the ice cream store and, I don't know, floating in the air is ice cream recommendations. But those ice cream recommendations are not dependent on any, mental state you have. And then I order, I don't know, Rocky Road, and the guy serving my ice cream says, it's pretty bad. Are you sure you want that? And I'm like, well, I don't know if it's bad or not. I haven't, tasted it. I don't know what it means to say something is bad if it's not indexed to any mental state that I have, or even just non-mental state, any non-cognitive state. So I have to explore the view a lot more. And I'm probably, I don't know, I'm fixating between doing meta-ethics or epistemology in higher education. So I don't know yet. I have to decide that. But
That's interesting. Epistemology.
I
I'm
go
reading a book
towards
on epistemology right now that's giving me an aneurysm.
I go towards aesthetics at the end of what you said there, Cage. Something about aesthetics, I think, is a mind-independent example of there's something with aesthetics, right? That is, even in something like abiogenesis, there must have been a certain possibility for life, a certain aesthetic that I think what we would say is good, rather than, so it has some sort of moral implications there aesthetically, mind independently.
I can't lie. I don't know what that means. It's because when you say something is beautiful, you might see this in practice when your friend comes home from Mexico and he says, I was at the Aztec temple, it was beautiful. Oftentimes I hear someone say, oh, was it? That's great. But what would be expected under the realism thesis for aesthetics is that you'd have some notion or some ideal of what that goodness is implying there. Is it some geometric goodness? Is it some mathematical goodness, some non-descriptive goodness you want to imply there? And I don't know what that means for something to be descriptively good.
I would say it's somewhat prescriptively, but descriptively good as well. But I agree that I'm hitting up against some difficulty expressing myself here. But I just would say if there was nothing, if there was just the reason I linked it to abiogenesis is because it seems as though without a scale to judge good and bad at all, we just arrive at nothingness. And it seems as though there's aesthetic qualities necessary for some sort of development in morality at all, to have a scale of good and bad. Abiogenesis or the evolution of life seems to imply some moral aesthetic. Otherwise, why not nothingness? Maybe that makes it clear.
Well, just because I don't this whole nothingness ideal doesn't seem like a problem to me, and it doesn't seem that way because after I'm long gone, or maybe I stop having emotions, then goodness ceases to matter to me. Goodness in and of itself, or any moral permissibility or impermissibility, isn't indexed to my values. So if you say well, I value, I don't know, the progress of society, that's going to continue on. But this aesthetic notion that, if there was nothing, would it still hold goodness? Well, no. Could it still hold value? Maybe, depending on how you cash out that value. In my view, no, absolutely not. Given my values are indexed to my mental states. So if there's no mental states, there's no values. There's no values, there's no importance or
Exactly.
any of that.
Exactly.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
so whether or not I value life is kind of irrelevant because I couldn't even have there's no value in relationship to nothingness at all.
not in my view. No, I don't really care much for nothingness.
Well, that doesn't even make sense because nothingness, you can't even. I'm not saying you don't care. I'm saying it's irrational to put a value on nothingness. You can't value something is this juxtaposition of terms. So to put zero in the denominator just gives you zero.
I don't know if I need to like compare X to Y to value X. I certainly think I can value X voluntarily given my mental states. The example I like to give is like, I have to do cardio tomorrow at 5 in the morning, right? I value my physique and my physical health. But I'd still say my emotional response to doing that is like, boo, cardio. It's bad.
Why aren't you just seeing that as a comparison of X being your value of health and Y being your whatever, laziness or hedonism?
Oh, because I don't choose my morals, right? I don't choose my emotions. They're not some cognitive faculty that I hold or some mental state I get to choose. My values are.
That I don't see how that doesn't show my point.
For
Because you
what?
have, let's say, nothingness would be that state where all there is just your initial what you're calling values, but your initial just instinctive responses to things. That would be non-thinking. That would be just no value dynamic, no thought, no rational abilities. The ability to actually then reflect against your instincts what you value is a juxtaposition of terms. That's the value process. That's the rational process. That's what a lot of animals just don't have. Their mind, in a lot of sense, is blank, right? Because it's just arriving at the next destination without any relative notion of value or comparison to another state, another term.
Yeah, I don't. My emotions are always rational given my view of it. They always have some reason, right? The reason is usually some object or some action. Or
I would
behavior.
totally disagree. Totally disagree. Your emotions can't even be articulated fully. This goes back to your skepticism and nihilism. To capture your emotions in a thought or in a proposition, right, is impossible. Absolutely
Yeah,
impossible.
I agree. I can still capture them in expressive statements, though. That's just called semantic non-factualism.
Sure. Where does that get you? In terms of this case for what I'm saying, which is actually a reasonable approach, not non-factualism, factualism. I'm advocating for an approach that allows us to value things.
Yeah, so am I. I just divorce my values from, like, morality, given my values are something I choose. And, like, my values can be irrational. My emotions just typically aren't, given the way I cash out reason. Reason just means provide means for. So some normative case might provide means for some emotion, making them reasonable.
You think that a person who just constantly, how do I say this, confirms their own bias is rational?
Does confirming your own bias mean like
coming up with reasons for why you did things and never reflecting deeply about the possibility that you could have acted otherwise? Just this constant state of mind, which no matter what you do, you rationalize it, quote unquote, as the way you're using the term. I just come up with reasons for what I did, and I never like question what I did in a sense of like, right? I just come up. Okay, so I'm trying to be generous to what you're saying. Like maybe the person comes up with the reason and regrets the reason, but still comes up with the reason. But I'm saying like, I don't know if that's quite enough to be truly rational. If you're coming up with reasons for how you acted, is that really of the rational mind? Because you would then just be never going to the gym, basically, in my head, the way I'm trying to paint this picture. You would just forever be like, oh, today I was lazy. Oh, tomorrow I was, right? The day before I was a little bit tired. The day before I didn't eat right. Oh, I was a little bit sick. And you would just forever be reasoning your way out of never going to the gym.
Yeah, it's because regret is a mental state that pertains to other mental states, but my emotions or my morality is not a mental state that which is action guiding. So my behavior isn't driven by my morality, it's driven by my values. I do things that are, in my own view, bad all the time, right? Like my cardio example is me doing something that I find bad. My morality is not, when I define something like good, it's not like what ought be done. When I say good, I just say I have an emotional or a positive emotional response. So maybe like I can't have regret about something because regret is a mental, or I can't have regret about a moral fact because the moral fact is not something that which can be true or false to have regret about. You can have regret or maybe have some remorse for some action you took given some moral fact, but those actions, these actions that I take are not provided by some moral fact, they're provided by my values.
Yeah, I totally get what you're saying there. I just don't know if I agree. Like, so there's a lot we could get into there. That's a really fascinating conversation. It's really deep too. Like, I don't know if I can fully corner you on this. I can sympathize completely with what you're saying. Yeah, we could go on for centuries, I feel like. This is very interesting. Well, so you don't see your values. I guess I would just say, how do you separate your values from morality? That seems redundant after everything you've explained. But how exactly can we separate our values from? It seems like values are a moral judgment.
Yeah, because moral judgments are things that are propositional. I don't see moral statements that way. I think when somebody expresses some moral position they hold, like abortion is immoral, or like you see on these TikTok lives all the time, criminalize all women, whatever. I'm just thinking they're saying like, actually, I could put it in the chat as a much better example.
You think they're saying, I prefer that people don't get abortion?
I think they're saying this, right? And that's not like something that can be true or false because that's not containing any sort of first order predicate or subject. And because it cannot be made true or false, but my values, or because it cannot be made true or false, nor do I voluntarily choose my emotions, then I cannot give any justification in that way for any moral statement. But I can justify my values, or my values are indexed to my mental states, and my mental states can be true or false. So when anybody asks me a moral proposition or a moral statement, my response is, similar to a non-cognitivist account. It actually is a non-cognitivist account. But if you're asking me about some value theory, and if I'm some voluntarist with respect to that, then yes, absolutely. You see subjectivists or any other cognitivist index their moral facts to their mental states. And I think that's confused, or leads down to foundationalism, which is unjustified. I don't think like a subjectivist might say abortion is immoral given some mental state that I hold. And that mental state can be true or false, which means you can give justification for that mental state. But eventually it might boil down to some properly basic fact. And that's just to say it's assumed to be true or an axiom or whatever other syntactic function you want to use to display its primitive nature. And that I think is redundant nor supported.
Just for some context, can I ask, Cage, what's your normative ethic?
I'm a deontologist.
So are you like a standard deontologist or are you a threshold deontologist?
No, I'm an act deontologist.
Okay, so you believe in like rights violations and stuff like that?
No, because rights are like ought principles, action guiding principles. I don't think that's the case.
Okay.
When I say like I'm an act deontologist, I just analyze the act in reference to some duty or maybe something along that sense, some act.
Okay, yeah, that's cool. I just wanted to clarify so I understand a little bit more what you're talking about. That's cool. Thank you.
No problem. Somebody does X. I have emotion about X. Sometimes I don't have emotions about X, and that would just make it some amoral fact. But rarely is that ever the case. Holy shit! It's cold up here. Yeah. So.
I get caught up in this. Yeah, so there's so much. Like again, there's so much, but like the
the ability to choose our emotions. I do think over time with practice you can choose your emotions, but again, I'm not trying to necessarily relate that to what you said about mental states, like a cognitivist's opinion on whether or not morals are objective. I guess I'm trying to pinpoint down a bunch of things. I'm trying to outline sanity itself. What is sanity, right? To the degree that we can trust our own thinking, and how that's related to some a moral aesthetic, moral objective aesthetic. I don't know how this is related to your mental state, right? Because your emotions are going to be somehow guided by I don't know what the word is, strategy for contemplation, right? You can hit a point where you strategize about your own contemplation, and that can affect your mental states. So I feel like there's a non-determinist factor here that is not being accounted for from both a subjectivist and from the way that you're using like a value theorist point of view. Like a value theory is subjective. We can't value. Everyone does have their own values on things. I would come at it from. I would agree with that, but I think that there are also objective moral truths, basically, and our ability to actually see those objective moral truths is going to help us emotionally. The proof is in the pudding, right? The more we miss the mark, the more somehow we are affected negatively, and our mental states are off the target, and our subjective values do not align with reality. So so there's two things: our subjective interpretation of value and how that's also related to the moral landscape, the actual consequences of our decisions. I don't know how much I just rambled or how much that related to what you said, Gage.
No, it's like relatively related. Obviously, well, I mean, moral realists think that my whole idea is incoherent, but subjectivists, or let's just use cognitivists because that's usually a broader example. They certainly disagree with you can divorce your emotions from your mental states. They might actually take emotions to be mental states, but then that either leads into like doxastic voluntarism or doxastic involuntarism. And I think that with respect to mental states, like you mentioned, I think we can control our emotive responses to actions. You know, somebody makes you mad, I think you can choose to act in such a way that would, display your ire, or act in such a way that can display your temperance. And I agree with that. But that's not me changing my emotions. I still am quite angry. I still might say what you did is stupid, bad, immoral, evil. But I'm going to change my mental state in accordance with what I value. So if my wife comes home and says, I just spent like 20 grand on, I don't know, like shoes, I'm going to be very, very upset. My emotion is going to be wrath, ire, anger, frustration. But my what I value is my wife's sanity and my wife's happiness and well-being. So I'm going to act in accordance with what I value, even though I think it's bad of what she did.
I see this as a bit of a cope, because I think a person who truly I don't know how to say this again, but there is a way to, if you are truly using the method of rationality, that you escape even those. It's not simply just overcoming your emotions. It's about feeling the truer, deeper, and better emotions. In fact, those situations, if properly leveraged, might elicit like positive emotions.
But that would be a new action to have a response to. Like if I act in accordance with my values and then she calms down and says, I can return the shoes, or we can budget our finances such that this isn't a problem, then, my emotions are not going to have new phenomena to respond to. And I might become more temperate. I might become more wrathful. It depends.
So The value problem I'm seeing as far as like utilizing the methodology of rationality when you're having a disagreement with someone is that it's not allowing you to collect data in a non-linear sense. If you just have one term x, which is representing you and your values and your ideas on things, there's no way to appropriately use the method of rationality in a way that incorporates y, which would be your girlfriend, in any way that that collects any data that's relative to the problem, unless you can see the like end of your own, basically how your position and values relate to hers. So you have your position and values, but now we have to juxtapose those against theirs, right? And so that's what this data collection, that's what's going on in our experience and our observations of this data collection, our the actions, the things that are taking place. So there's two things. Like, I would say that first of all, in order to have that data collection take place, there does have to be this detachment from your own values. You cannot be bogged down in your own values to correctly compare and contrast her values against yours. And that, if that's a frustrating process, you're probably experiencing confirmation bias in the data collection. Do you see my point there? Our own emotions are a direct indicator towards confirmation bias in data collection when we are juxtaposing and comparing values of others. Do you see my point there?
Yeah, but I don't take like values of others into account. I might take like their emotional responses. Like oftentimes, if you're at work and you say to somebody, this fucking job sucks, you're not trying to like display your emotive response to the job. It's very clear how you feel about having to wake up at 3 a.m. given some inductive account of your behavior and your mannerisms walking in. You're merely saying that as some sort of moral utterance to say, or maybe to not elucidate, so extract some other expressive response from those around you. But you might all still value money. So I'm still not indexing my moral propositions to these values.
I don't know if I fully. I think I might have missed you there. I don't know if I fully tracked what you said there.
Yeah, like I'm not indexing the values of others. I couldn't care less if my coworker, or if my boss couldn't care less if I value, getting home every night with the kids. He just thinks that it's good, if I stay in work because it elicits some positive emotional response. He's not taking into account like my values there.
So, but what's your point there? Like, you're not trying to say that makes him rational, are you?
No, it makes him like, when I think rational, I think in accordance with reason, and I don't think emotions are the types of things that, or sorry, I don't think values are the types of things that always need be reasonable. I think there can be some values that are unreasonable, but maybe not unreasonable, perhaps unjustified.
Yeah, well, they would be, well, like, let's say I use the tape measure to measure the length of a piece of wood. I would get a value, but the value's wrong if I don't measure it properly.
I guess so. I guess you could say if what you value, is predicated on some unjustified value, then it may be unreasonable. But I also don't think like values are the types of things that can be justified, nor do I think emotions are the types of things that are justified. So if I say like my boss is reasonable, I'd say no, he's acting irreasonably.
Yeah.
But that might be because he's violating my emotional response to things, or maybe violating
but this is my tension about confirmation bias. How can is there an objective way to actually measure your two viewpoints to get to some objective standard on who is wrong, or are we just lost in the ether of subjective value comparisons here?
Oh yeah, I think there's value conflicts all the time, and I don't think they're like solvable in any independent of mind sense, given those values are dependent on your mind.
But similar to the piece of wood, there's an actual thing we're trying to accomplish, right? Cut the wood accurately. And how is that not grounded in all other aspects, like in the case of assuming the baseline incentive and value is money when it comes to a job, then the business should be booming. That's the overall arching, right? Like piece of wood that we're trying to cut. So all of our value comparisons have to align to that reality. If the business isn't doing well, then that's proof basically of that all agents in that, right, that cooperation are underperforming, that they're not choosing moral decisions.
Because I don't think businesses are like mind dependent. I think you can run a business with like 0 humans and have a functional enterprise. I think you could have machines doing this work. So I don't think it's the type of thing.
So, like, you think the length of the board is mind dependent. The proper length of the board that we're trying to cut for the house, that's mind dependent.
Yeah, I think different. Like,
right. This is where we differ. Because I think it's actually objective. Like, I understand that we are trying to build a metric to cut the piece of wood properly, but ultimately it's objective how long the piece of wood has to be to hold up the house. The house, again, yes, the house is, right, an idea, a mind-dependent thing, but the actual thing, the actual structure that is the building is not a mind dependent.
Okay. Even when you say properly, that's still baking in the realist notion. Like, I don't think it's proper to say there is some. I don't think it's right to say there is some proper moral fact, because proper would indicate some standard that is, acceptable universally. Like maybe a moral relativist who is like relative to the globe would say there is a proper moral fact, and they're going to index that to the, maybe consensus of, the population. But
Yeah.
I don't think it's like fair to say there is some, proper way to build this house, as proper would indicate some independent of mind fact that's written down on some piece of paper or maybe is in the air.
I know. No. You're so right about that. But as far as the length of the cut of wood there is, it's weird, isn't it? It's like, I know that the overall house doesn't have, there's so many ways to build a house. But once we have the blueprint and we're putting, right, the actual joist into place, like there's only one way to cut it. Right? I mean, ultimately we can screw up and we can fix it and but like the length that we need it to be is one specific length. There's not really, and so that seems to be okay. So you just because that's bogged down in some compressed model, you want to doubt it and say, well, that doesn't make it objective.
Well, no, because I don't think it's action guiding, right? Like, I think there is a proper cut of wood, therefore you must cut the wood to the proper cut of wood. I think like that's just descriptive, even if like that was the case, and even if it's not going to like account for context. And I'm not a contextualist.
Okay, but like, see how it's like, okay, I just see it as like zoomed in too far, in the sense of like an ant could be doing a poorer or better job at whatever their little ant job is to do, but when they're doing a better job, they're cutting the wood and making the anthill what it's supposed to be. And that's the part that's the objective standard. You just see this wood cutting and this house building as some mind dependent thing. Well, ultimately, what is this mind that we're all operating? Like, the consensus model isn't enough. I'm not talking about consensus. I'm talking about the actual outcomes and consequences of our actions. Those are objective. And morality is tethered directly to those actions. To doubt the consequences of our actions is to doubt, I would say, the moral landscape, the fact that there are better and worse outcomes of our actions, not just mind dependently, not just for us, right? For this, like, the greater good, or whatever you want to say. I don't know how to wrap that up, but like, you get what I'm getting at, I think.
Yeah, I suppose so. But the issue with me is like, I agree with you. There is like morality is like tethered to some, I would say, mental state, given I think value is a mental state, or maybe some mind state is probably a better way to put it. What I don't agree with is that that oftentimes these realist notions have any entailment given that. Like, I don't value the proper cut of wood. I value the house being built properly. And that's not dependent per se on this measurement that some engineer has put in some fucking tower in like Utah and I'm trying to build a house in Alaska. You know, like I think like nor am I a contextualist, but I think it's really important that like this is excuse me, this is what I mean when I say I think these things are often descriptive. And I say that because like look, if there is some independent of mind moral fact, I don't think it accounts for your values. And if it doesn't account for your values, then I don't see how it's a moral fact, because that's what I take moral facts to.
Yes, you're spot on with all of that. I would agree with everything you just said. I would just flip it and say my moral facts are a result of my ability to value. My ability to value things in alignment with reality. So value seems to be this gift, this thing that's given to me. It's a thing I'm grasping at, right? It's like air it's like oxygen in the air. It's like my lungs are struggling constantly to get the oxygen out of the air, right? And if that ceased, then I would cease. It's the same struggle with these like tapping into true value. My value can be off or my value can be on. It can be aligned with reality or unaligned with reality. Like that's the cutting the wood problem. It's how close can we get to an accurate cut of wood within a certain limit. We all know that we can't actually cut the wood down to the atomized perfection of length. So we have to, right, parameterize it maybe within half a millimeter, an eighth of a millimeter, right, accuracy. And that limitation is the value process. If we don't have a limit, like that's the objective quality of this value problem, right? We have to limit. We cannot have an unlimited scope and then measure value. It seems like a limiting value seems like the very limiting, hard-nosed reality thing, like the object of reality. That's what value is. It doesn't seem, I can have my subjective notions of value, but if they're wrong, that's going to be absolutely consequential to my life. So it's like running up value is another paradigm similar to the wind, or just another thing that we're trying to figure out, like how to relate things together in order to measure their appropriate length or their appropriate, right, meaning or value, etc.
Well, by wrong there, you mean like violating some independent of mind moral fact?
Ultimately, yes. Because, well, to value something that isn't aligned with reality, I have my own value, my own mind-dependent valuation, and it can be wrong. Well, what is that referencing? It's wrong compared to what?
I think if you call a value wrong, or maybe, not, no, I don't want to say, I don't think it's the type of thing that's true or false. I think if you call it wrong, you're just saying it violates some normative clause you have or some action guiding principle. But what I'm confused about is that value is the action guiding principle. So to say a value is wrong might be to say it violates some previous or prior value. But if this
very, very well said, yeah.
If that independent of mind moral fact isn't some prior value, then I don't understand what that means.
I know, because the deriving the meaning is secondary to realizing the presupposition, or I don't know what I want to say here. There's like, I understand what your tension is. I don't think that there's meaning to be had. I don't think we can derive meaning from value. Value is like logic. Like logic and value go hand in hand. I don't think you can just to subjectively value something is to be irrational. Right? It is you're not valuation is this measurement problem when we put a ruler to the page that we can never perfectly measure the page. So, and you're asking, well, what's the meaning of that? Then why measure the page? Kind of. I know that's not directly what you meant, but that's what I'm hearing. It's like the page can be measured, right? We can measure the page. We can measure the wood. if we limit ourselves within a certain context, now we find the meaning. See, now we build the house. But if you aren't willing to make that leap of faith, your skepticism is nothing but valid, nothing but sound, right? You're lost in subjective valuation, because the very context of value requires this limited realization. You cannot perfectly, right? If I finally mark the page on the ruler, I'm admitting my losses. If my teacher says measure the page, I put the ruler to the page, I put my pen to the page, I mark the point where it says 10 inches or 12 inches, right? I'm literally admitting I can never get perfectly to the point, right? That mark is a mark of ignorance. So that's the meaning of the objective standard. That is I would say the originator of thinking, the origin of thought, this complex comparison of what is true and what our subjective interpretation of the truth is. That seems like objective standard for the rational method. If I'm bogged down in only my subjective valuation, I cannot compare or value anything appropriately. It's all just my own, no feedback mechanism, no data collection is ever going to get me to reparameterize my model. I'm just always going to be led into, right, painful suffering, basically.
But I don't like the whole disagreement that I'm having is this like value being not dependent on any mental state.
I know.
Because like when I think of
No.
like norms, I think of like, I don't know, maybe some independent or like shared rule, or maybe like expectations or some action guiding principle or whatever. And then when I think of values, I might be indexing my values to certain beliefs about what I like find important or what I find, maybe what do I want to say here? Maybe those values are going to like provide some utility or what have you. And if we're saying like, okay, values are not something that are dependent on beliefs, then I don't understand how we're divorcing that, given any standard.
Yeah. I know.
I don't get it.
Well, because our measurement of the page is obviously mind dependent, but the page is mind independent, right? Like the piece of wood itself and the length it's currently at is totally mind independent, right?
Yeah, I agree though, because it's empirical and quantifiable. You can't like quantify moral facts.
But the moral, so so to quantify the moral fact of whether or not the carpenter is intending to cut the wood accurately or not is going to depend on how well they limit their measure of the wood, not how well they measure the wood, right? If they just put the measuring tape to the wood and they mark it off every time, that's not the intention. That is the quantifiable intention you're looking for in whether or not this person is actually employing a value that's aligned with the objective moral standard, which you're skeptical of. But I can directly see it. I can directly see, right? Because a good carpenter doesn't look at the ruler as measuring the wood, right? They use it as to limit their own errors. It's an error tool. It's a tool to limit the inevitable fucking errors that you're going to fuck up every fucking cut you make and waste material. So it's this tool. It's not a tool to measure the wood. It's a tool to limit your own errors. And that is a moral standard. That's an objective. See, of course, inches and centimeters doesn't matter what metric you use, right? It's literally the metric itself is about limiting your own errors. That's this juxtaposition of terms. Again, going back to like a disagreement with your girlfriend. It's like you could have all the empirical data on your value system and how she never does the dishes, she bought too many shoes, she spent too much money, of all the data collection. But until you actually compare your values next to hers in a non-biased way,
Too many shoes is crazy.
There's well, that was Cage's example earlier. I don't think I would never be sexist and assume that women have too many shoes.
I would.
But
That's
yeah,
fucking crazy.
I feel like the objective standard seems to be one of a non. It's almost like a non or like meta rational, deeply rational. Like I don't know how to say this. Like the standard of sanity, rationality, and morals all seem to go hand in hand in an objective way. It doesn't matter how I interpret these things, except to my own detriment. These things are out there in the world that I'm trying to tap into. I can fight against them and I will burn myself constantly, or I can adapt and see, right, how I have to constantly compare my own. Okay, what is my girlfriend? At the end of the day, what is my girlfriend? She's when I'm struggling through a disagreement with her. She's this emergence of reality, right? Giving me unpredictable or like I guess like I just don't undesirable outcomes. It's like having a really rainy day. Like if I go outside and there's a really rainy day and that really ruins my day, that's very similar to me having a girlfriend who's arguing me about shoes that ruins my day. It's just life throwing problems at me, right? And there's a strategy. I can either have a way to utilize my emotions in that setting, or be basically swallowed up by it. What difference does it make if I'm suffering out in the cold, right, and freezing to death, or I'm at home in my warm place fighting with my girlfriend until 3 in the morning? The mental state is very similar, right? It's like how is it that I'm so locked in my own confirmation bias that the actual reality is eliciting these negative emotional. It's literally that from my standpoint, it's literally that your negative emotions are directly a sign of irrationality and in a disalignment with the moral objective standard, the moral landscape that's actually out there. If you are struggling to align, right, your emotions and you feel negative, that's I would say that's a direct like data point that somehow you're not valuing the situation appropriately. Because if you were, you wouldn't have that negative feedback. There's something there about, and I think there is something to do with making appropriate choices to alleviate that suffering. There is a strategy, right? So that going forward, when adversity comes, you don't feel those negative emotions. A person who's very out of shape is going to feel a lot more negative emotions going to the gym for the first time than you. Perhaps. Maybe you're harder on yourself than them. I don't know. But there's an element that eventually over time our mind is able to overcome, I think, those original, and that's through strategy and practice. That's not a given thing. That's not an entitlement. Most people don't get it. Most people have the negative emotional response. Most people can't like they can choose. They could choose, right, to go to the gym. They could choose to not feel those negative emotions, but they're indulging. It's like an indulgent thing. And that's from my perspective. Again, they don't want to be rational. They don't really want to seek evaluation. It's confirmation bias. It's very unscientific way of thinking to be able to just assume what your girlfriend's values are by her actions according to your values. Right? That's very much irrational, basically.
Yeah, but I'd just factor those values, or I'd factor these conditions in my values, because I can choose what I value and do not value. So when I say I very much so prefer the conditions in which I'm sitting in my luxury apartment arguing with the wife over like the fucking shoes she spent 20 grand on versus being out in the freezing cold, having very little idea on how I want to get home, or B, any sort of other issue like that. So I'd factor those in and be inclusive of my values. This would be more of a critique on those that factor in their emotional states with their values. I just don't do that for this very reason, ironically.
Yeah, this is so interesting to me. like I would again flip it and say not that I don't factor my emotions into my values. The other way around, I factor my values into my emotions. As soon as I have an emotion that's negative, I assess my values as possibly confirmation bias.
Yeah, I can't like choose my emotions. That's probably the issue we're having.
Well, I can't choose them, but I can choose to like. It's interesting, right? Maybe you can't choose. This goes back to the origin problem. When you originally feel it, but you can choose to indulge in it or alleviate it.
Yeah, if I'm a hedonist and I'm like, I don't know, if some Epicurean thesis or maybe some more advanced one that's not so primitive, then yeah, I'm gonna like be able to choose or maybe act in accordance with my values given some emotional state. If not, those values are a part of, or my emotional state are a part of those values. You know, I value the mental state of pleasure. I value the mental state of, or I disvalue the mental state of pain. But I mean, I just don't include those in my mental states because I don't think I can choose when I feel suffering. I don't think I can choose when I feel anger. I just think it.
But do you think you can choose the run-on sentences that you're having, right? To a degree.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are like a part of my. Oh,
And
there's
those
not.
are those are directly linked. That's what's so interesting. Those are directly linked to the emotions you experience in the future.
No, they're linked to my value. I value good conversation. That's why I'm like considering my responses before I say them. I value my pursuit of higher education such that I do the most. Um, I act in accordance with said values. So I want to, absorb as much information, as much perspectives as possible, even those that which do not like directly study the field. But my emotions might be saying, I'm a bit hungry right now, so it's a little bit bad that I'm sitting here doing this instead of eating food. But I still think it's in accordance with my values. Therefore, I'm going to do it, or I should do it.
Yeah, but then going forward, it will be shown whether or not those decisions were like. This is where I don't understand how you want to eliminate like the mind independent aspect of morality, because like isn't the proof in the pudding? Aren't your decisions going to yield some sort of outcomes? And it's not that I'm a consequentialist, it's just that like obviously your consequences are inevitable. The consequences of your actions are inevitable. So to be
Yeah,
unaligned with those would be irrational.
I just don't factor those in because I'm a deontologist. I don't really.
Wow. Dude, that's insane to me.
Yeah, it's a huge
That's
critique
crazy.
of deontology. It's like one of the main. It's like for utilitarianism, it's like you have the trolley problem, but the change they make is like there's 5 people on both tracks, but for some reason you really want to. You have like a real big kink for participation. So the utilitarian would say, given the utility of you, given the like mental state of happiness after you pull that lever because you provided some utility, then you should pull the lever. The deontic question is, since I did not perform any duty, there's no moral status associated, so I'm going to harm the 5 people. There's other sort of values given like what sect of deontology, but yeah, I don't really factor much consequences into my moral ideals. Nor do I really think I could.
I know, and I sympathize with that as well. Like I was hesitant because I'm not a consequentialist, but there is something to being humble in front of the inevitable outcomes of your like. Okay, the consequences don't necessarily prove your moral ideals. They don't prove anything or say anything about your intentions or where your mind state's at. But I don't think it's too far to say that if your actions were truly aligned with one, this is where we would separate, but with like the objective moral landscape, the consequences should yield fruit.
I don't think there's many realists that are consequentialists. I
know.
don't think the realist would really care about any particular context. I think they just say this is the moral fact. This moral fact is true, independent of any mental state, any situation, any consequence. Well, they could be. Well, no. So that doesn't make sense to me either, right? Because consequentialists are gonna have a huge field day with that. And so
Yeah, we're a little in the waters here, little lost here. But yeah, this is hard to wrap my head around because for me, I do take consequences into consideration, but I agreed with your statement that they don't necessarily say anything about my moral ideals. Yet there is something to be said about how my moral ideals are related to consequences of things. It's not necessarily that the consequences are proof of my moral ideals, it's just that I'm obviously aiming my moral ideals at the best possible outcome. Something like that.
yeah, probably. I think a lot of people, well, some sort of subversion of this critique is like, well, clearly the new consequence state of, or the new consequential, or precedent state of affairs is going to be a new act or new state, such that deontics can be applied to that, and you can remove any sort of prior influence or any antecedent affairs. But I think it's lazy. Um, yeah, I don't think it does anything to subvert the critique at all.
When you have these conversations, I can sense you and I are in a very similar spot. Maybe I'm projecting a bit, so correct me if I'm wrong here. But the thirst to be able to have a community that I can really, flesh out a lot of my own issues or like thoughts with is something that's very hard to quench. Like, there's not many people that are interested, right, in a specific thing that I'm studying, or like if I do find someone, they're kind of on their own path with it, and so I struggle to really like, whether it's through school or the internet, TikTok discussions or whatever, it is really like difficult to like. I've sensed somewhat of your apathy sometimes. Like, it's difficult. It's difficult to find your community, find where you sort of need to be to really flourish these ideas, or like what the intellectual communities that's necessary to really educate yourself these days.
I don't even like most people in my class. Like, I don't like. So, like, I don't know. In undergrad, it's weird because you have to do your core classes, and that takes up about like a year and a half of your time. It's really fucking boring. Um, well, not boring. It's just if you like read all this stuff before, then like for you to go into it, for anybody to go into it, it'd probably be really boring stuff. But then as you get like higher, you specialize more, and sometimes you'll have some common classes. Um, and before those common classes, you'll have like some common interest, or perhaps not. More often than not, there is no common interest. So like I'll be in classes with people who just abhor epistemology and they really want to study bioethics, or they really want to study, the ethics of law. And I couldn't give two shakes of a rat's ass about the ethics of law. So it becomes really awkward when talking about those types of things. And higher academia doesn't do anything to sort of help you. Yes, it's like I don't know, grad school is a much smaller community, or so I've been told. Um, but even then, we're all just like struggling to pay fucking bills. So I don't know who Cal is. I'd have to like speak to him. Oh, Cal the vegan? Oh, I know Cal. Oh, I had like one conversation with that guy. Fucking love him. Such a beauty. Super articulate.
My focus at the moment is this money problem because I feel like you said, a lot of us are just trying to pay bills. And I know that the pattern I see is more often than not, intellectuals and academically inclined people are not necessarily financially literate. And I think that's like not a coincidence. I think there's a pattern there. And so for me to really like separate myself from academia and take the leap of faith into financial literacy has been one of like real struggle, bro. Like, especially as far as this community building thing goes, and like finding like-minded people, especially in Canada, like, being of the capitalist mindset and really figuring out the money problem is not what most people are focused on. They do just want to pay bills and go to work. And to a degree, I see that as like possibly one of the biggest downfalls in not only of the education system, but in like our culture. Like, yeah, there's so many opportunities. And like for me, humbly to be exposed to them the way that I have been is like it makes me antsy. It makes me really want to find like a group of people that are down to like make some real money, make some real changes in their lives financially, and it's not through labor, and it's not through your education, it's not through credentials, it's through your own risk management strategy and your own ability to leverage your own money.
Buddy,
That's something most of us are scared
Capitalist
of.
for prison 101.
I was a mechanic.
Capitalist for
I was a mechanic, financially literate. I had I had everything you could have asked for, and then I decided to do an undergrad. And now I have a child, I have so many other things, and I have now I'm considering doctoral the doctoral. So it's like fuck me. I went from and I could go back to being a mechanic, but it's like it's the what do you love to do versus how to make money.
exactly.
And my dumbass decided to do what I love to do. So
That's a W, though. I think that you're more satisfied throughout life. I'm fixing to go back to school at 8 years old, like a dumbass. I'll be 39 when I start. To further my education and get my PSYD.
I'm gonna say this right now. This is not to either of you. This is just totally me projecting my own opinion here. I will never go back to school. I'll never ever. I've seen enough of it, and I loathe it. I'm so jaded on the education system that, for real, like if I
Because
had
you got that Canadian education, bro. Stop playing with us.
That's true. We've talked about the Mises Institute. That's like the one institute that I might go to. But overall, even that, I would only go to it as a lecturer or like as a collaborator. I would never go there as a student would be pretty awesome. But like again, I think they only do it through like scholarship and stuff. So it's not as if it's not a typical institution, right? Like you're part of the business. You're part of everything's like very much invested heavily financially. You're not just like passively getting an education basically. So I don't know, there's this element of like, I think one of our biggest problems is education. Like our culture is so passive. It's so passive. No one wants to actually get their hands dirty and solve the problems. No one thinks it's worth their time or their effort to actually like get real problems solved, as humble as they are. Fixing a pipe, like whatever it is, like changing the bearings on your vehicle, changing the oil, all this simple shit that no one knows how to do. Cook a meal for themselves even, right? And it's like, for real, there's so much wealth in those things that we're neglecting, that it's the same with financial. Like we think our $10 sitting in our bank account, we think it's like literally walking past ripe tomatoes in the market every day. We have no idea what that $10 even is, where it could be placed to benefit us long term. Like there's so much hidden from the average perspective on this that it's like, yeah, it's I don't know what to say. It makes me antsy.
yeah, I don't blame you. I don't like the idea of being or incurring more debt. Certainly not. Nor do obviously I speak to Lance and other like Danny and anybody who actually has the formal post undergrad education, and Lance is pretty vocal about his disdain for the institution and how it pumps out more doctorates than the industry requires jobs, and he doesn't like how a lot of the undergrads that take Phil, they often do like the pipeline of, you're going to do Phil, then you're going to do then law school, like the Phil undergrad to law school pipeline. And I don't like it either. Like you said, I was the person who, 4 years before high school, or 4 years before fucking high school, before COVID, excuse me, I did my trade exam, finished high school, finished the trade, got the 310S, whatever. And then it's like, okay, well, now what? I spend all this time thinking. I spend most of my nights getting off work and immediately going on live or maybe reading an ethics paper, or maybe debating about some meta-ethical question, or then an epistemic question. Well, I didn't know what it was called back then. And there's so much.
But this disconnect between how this philosophy stuff relates to your economic prosperity is not popularized.
I'm not sure I understand.
All of these, I see the institution, right? There's a bunch of ways to come at this, but the funding model, the debt, how that's related to student loans and what a school is one thing that we have to consider. But a whole nother thing is how literally the academic curriculum is not tied to financial literacy. I'm not talking about necessarily just running a business and like working hard and like being a tradesman or whatever. I'm talking about really seeing the affluence that's possible just off of the money, with just the money you have, just $10 or whatever. Like the amount of luxury that our money provides us, the liquidity and like what the money is, how the money system works, is beyond like all these philosophical lessons you're considering, whether they're ethically related, politically related, morally related, they all relate to a strategy in the market in one way or another. But that's hidden. That's hidden from the schools. The schools don't teach how this is all directly related to the market and how you should approach your own finances and make money and get wealthy. It's a hidden. They teach the lessons, but then they disconnect it from the financial literacy, which is actually the crux of risk management and tying all this together into seeing how like morals are objective and how it does relate to like human psychology and wealth and prosperity and moral decisions with that wealth, all those things, risk, right? How your indecision will haunt you in the market, whether you're wealthy or not, all these things. Like
Yeah.
sorry, go ahead.
No, it's okay. Go on.
Well, like your curiosity for these topics, from my experience, my curiosity hit an endpoint because I didn't see it as possibly lucrative, and so it's like go back to trades or like I don't know, be a teacher, I guess, or like there was no economic inclination towards the lessons I was learning. Then when I started actually seeing how they were directly connected to economics and capitalism, I was astounded by how ignorant I really was. These are all lessons about how to get rich. They're just hidden from us. Like not only logic and data collection and statistics and probability and emotional stability and all these things, but also morality. This ability to act good, to act patiently, to act in good faith. All these components in the market are like what drive a society into productivity or not. You know.
Yeah, it's a similar question I'm faced with respect to like, choosing a career versus like choosing a career that's going to make you money and make you money relatively easily versus, choosing a career that might not.
Yeah, exactly. And I just think that like your education is a lot more valuable even at this point than I think you even recognize, and that's the shame that I felt when I fully dove into like the imposter syndrome I felt for dropping out of school, like, and for feeling like, oh, I should finish my degree or there's more I should learn, there's some hidden credential out there that'll make me successful. It's literally all like going to the I don't know, jujitsu mat and having some master continuously convince you that, he's the absolute best trainer that you need to go to because he's mastered all jujitsu and he knows all the moves. It's exact same. It's the exact same facade that schools play. And until you are ready to actually jump in the ring yourself and not rely on, oh, master jujitsu, right? You are not truly a competitor. You have no skin in the game. Your education means nothing until you are financially literate, until you have money to play, until you make money, right? Until you have actual money and you're not in debt. Your education really, in my mind, means as much as that. It means nothing. You're negative. You're learning. What are you learning? You have no money, right? And this is me talking to myself, like convincing myself I'm learning. Oh, I'm of high education. My numbers show otherwise, bro. I look like a fucking idiot. Educated? Where's the money? If I'm so smart and I know so many things and I'm so right, it pisses me off, dude. And then to see how easy it really is to turn $10 into $100, right? To turn 100 into $1,000, and to see how emotionally unstable I am in these positions because of my education, it rots me. It rots my own opportunity. My own opportunity cost is my education. I have to constantly dwindle down all this trauma that I have to taking risks because it hurts me financially still, even when I take these, investments and stuff.
Yeah, I don't disagree. There's that. I don't know. When I was in my second year now, holy shit, it's been that long. Maybe even like end of first. That whole Andrew Tate wave came, right? And he was like, I remember one video he posted was like talking to a psychologist, and he's like, "How
I've
I'm
watched it.
wealthy. I have like $40 million in the bank, and you're over here interviewing me, even though you're more educated and he dropped out of school." And it doesn't bother me to know that there's that opinion of, oh well, you have such high education, but you're flipping things on eBay for money. It's like, okay, well, do you value thought or do you value money? Which one are you going to value when it comes time for those bells to ring? And oftentimes I find myself watching cinemas about old men. Like just the other day, I watched The Inside Man on Netflix. Spoiler alert. And it was like an old man was diagnosed with cancer, and he immediately starts thinking about how he didn't live, or what the world is. And it's like, why is it when life's about to end, we all of a sudden get philosophical? You know?
Yes. Yeah. I suppose, yeah, you touched on a lot there, but I suppose I know that was a bit of a just rhetorical question, but like you're right. You're absolutely right.
No, it wasn't rhetorical. I promise you it was substantive. I was actually curious.
Sincerely, what about what are you curious about?
Yeah, like why isn't it when older gentlemen or older women?
You're actually curious about that? Like you think it's this? I think it's this valuation thing. Like I think like what mathematically, when we are calculating, when we're trying to figure out the value of something, we have a numerator and a denominator. That's the only way to plot a price, right? We have an input, right, at the and we compare it to another input. So when your life is ending, you're comparing all the things. You all of a sudden your whole metric for value has just completely shifted, right, to a very minute I don't know, manifestation. You can all of a sudden, you have it's clear. Everything becomes clear suddenly, right? The clarity is so minute that the moments going past are not just these like monotonous moments of like subconscious. You're almost out of body because of the way that you're noticing time pass. Your time is so limited now that you're somewhat hallucinating. The philosophy is going to pour out of you because reality is shifting in front of your eyes. Everything's changing, right? Philosophy protects you because at least you become curious about reality rather than just seeping down into, right, depression and those kinds of things. Because, right, being diagnosed with life-ending cancer is life changing. Your whole reality, every value, your loved ones, your priorities, the meals you eat, the games you play, everything would change instantly.
I think it's odd though. If you have some understanding that this is what happens towards the end of your life, then why would you, I guess, bully those that, and maybe not even bully, just make fun of those that seek to achieve that value before the end of their life so that they can give it proper
Right.
thought?
Right. There's two things there. If you successfully do that, then you won't be overwhelmed by something like a cancer diagnosis. If you have successfully, right, the only test for you to prove that you've actually been able to stabilize those values on things is to go through something difficult, right? And that's because I believe that the pain associated with going through something difficult will still teach you, because no matter how much you philosophize or think about things, that pain and that reality is going to be probably much different than you're expecting. It will still have a lesson to play. Perhaps your whole world won't crumble in front of you. Perhaps you knew the loved ones you had, and you still go to work because you love your job, etc. And but you will still learn lessons, right? There will still be times where this is just a new stage of life, and there is no ultimate way to experience something like that before you experience it, but yeah, a psychologically, anti-fragile person won't have their whole world uplifted by that kind of news. But I think that's like you're saying, it's not a bad thing to try to achieve that. It's just it's a humbling thing, because you're trying to achieve the mind state of a person who's gone through a bunch of suffering. So I don't know if we want to rush to that knowledge.
I don't know. I'm trying to it'd be great, back in the old days. And by old days, I mean like fucking Socratic era. The only philosophers that existed were wealthy aristocrats that had far too much money, so they didn't work. So they sat around thinking about. They were already fast forwarded to the end of their life, and now that's not the case. And these deep thoughts are reserved for those with, who we call have too much time on their hands or whatever. But I think it's a bit interesting that, everybody becomes a philosopher at the end of their life, but to penalize those that become a philosopher at the start of their life seems a bit just odd.
Oh, totally. I mean, yeah. My dad's always said that we become philosophers 2 times in our life, right? When we graduate around 18, 19, and then right near the end of our life.
Yeah.
In between, it's a lot of work and monotony and, life and family stuff, and then the real deep thinking. Those are the two big life changes, right? When you're released into the world as an adult, and with enough knowledge to be a philosopher, supposedly, and then at the end of your life. And I'd probably say that at the end of your life, it's probably stronger, right? The time preference is hard to be non-biased about. This is something Mises talks about. Like, time preference is huge, and it's not easy to be a long-term thinker, right? Your time preference and what you indulge in short term. There's a reason why humans are forever sort of, indulgent in that way. They're hedonistic and they're impulsive. It's not easy to be, disciplined like that.
No, it's not. And I mean, talk about this for years, but it would be amazing. Like, the wife wants to be a lawyer, right? Awesome, right? And that's her passion. It just so happens that her passion is in like a field that is wealthy, or can easily become wealthy, and that's amazing. But then my passion used to be automotive repair, and then it became thinking. So I thought, I Googled, in hindsight, I wish I could go back. I Googled, look, what I like thinking. I like thinking about these questions that everybody else finds to be stupid, or, why are you thinking about that? Like, who gives a shit if, ethics are independent of mind or dependent of mind? I still have to follow the law. And sure, valid point. You're not going to do something illegal just because you're I don't know, an error
Yo,
theorist.
KJ, I think you're just going through a phase, bro. I don't think you're gonna want to like be a philosopher, quote unquote, when you realize there's like no job prospects like in academia for philosophy, whether it be like research.
What?
Over it.
I was gonna what? No, that's a good point. There is barely any job prospects. Me and Lance were just talking about that. It's really, really difficult to get a job, and even if you do become a professor, it's very common that a lot of
Guys dropped me. Like I'm not trolling you. I'm going through the same phase. I'm just getting out of
Sorry.
the cage.
Sorry.
No,
It's all
I
good.
know. It's like, look, me and Lance were just talking about that. Like, most of my professors now are like 4 of them are here teaching one class, the other one are there teaching another. It's like, it's not easy. So I don't disagree with you at all, Clark. Like, even in the slightest.
I mean, I think like your best bet hopefully would be to come home to Rome, be a Catholic, and become a Dominican friar and use your inquisitive
Oh my
mind.
fucking!
Excuse me.
I'm Haitian, Colin.
That's fucking crazy.
You
Oh
don't
my
need to
God,
be
I
like
almost
from the
choked.
Dominican Republic to be a Dominican friar. Yeah, they'll guide you, they'll house you, they'll give you free tuition, they'll pay for your college, they'll give you.
Clark, you say the craziest shit sometimes, bro.
I think KJ would be a good priest. I think there's no point in trying to become like a philosopher, quote unquote, like in academia. There's just no.
Trying to limit the field, Kalia? Are you trying to limit the field in the competition?
I just think it's dead. Think about it. To get selected for like a PhD program, there's going to be like 5 people that get selected, and out of them, like only 2 are going to probably get their PhD. And at that point, you're drowning in debt. And regardless of like whether or not you get your PhD from like a credible university, like you're going to have a long road to like getting published. Even if you have like a rock star dissertation, none of that's going to matter. Like, I just don't think there's any prospects for like actual philosophy anymore. You're better off using your philosophy to like using your abstract skills to like, further the Dominican friar's purpose of following God or the one true church of Catholicism.
W following God. I concur.
I could still go down the whole, like, Phil undergrad lawyer pipeline.
Yeah, that's what everyone does.
But I agree with you. There is barely any prospects, and even if you do get the prospects, getting published is well, not necessarily difficult, but becoming a popular, staple of philosophy is damn near fucking impossible. Who's going to become the next Kierkegaard? Who's going to become the next John Searle?
Yeah, you can do it. Like, do you know Eric and Evan and them? Mustafa.
Valid inference and
So they actually got published, but the way they got, and this is like it's true for like any like sort of or most fields, but like it's because they know fucking Malpass. They've been talking to him for years. They know Graham Oppie, and they sort of were able to get them in because they have been published for a long time, and they know how it works, and they know how like the referees and stuff like judge like the papers and whatnot. But they didn't get published into like a good journal. I don't actually know what journal they got published into, but it's
they contribute?
Huh?
They contributed, right? They didn't like fucking publish a whole paper.
Yeah, no, they contributed to. Well, no, Eric published his own paper. I'm pretty sure. They all worked on it together. I know
some undergrads do that, but they're fucking like hard in the paint every day. They like eat, sleep, and breathe whatever like not interdisciplinary, whatever classes they want to take. And it's like a couple of them, but most of those people are in Cambridge or Oxford or NYU or any of those fucking places.
I think the more like you activate your faculty of reason through like being just like a pure thinker, you start to like understand more about reality. Because I mean, everyone knows you're just gonna be like opening up more like frontiers of just like further questions about everything. But I think that like when you activate reason in that way, you're understanding more about God. That's what God is allowing you to do, if that makes sense. So I think that you could use that sort of that ability that you have to understand and like come closer to God. And all you need to do is confess your sins to like a priest and repent and become born again, and you're on the right track. Even though we're all going to heaven, like it doesn't matter if you never like turn your life to God. Like you could at least make good money doing it and doing philosophy and like theology and stuff, if that's your purpose.
Maybe. I don't know what my purpose is.
ultimately, like, we're all going to heaven, I think. So, like, you'll be okay in the end. But
Should you
Fucking
should
good guy.
we should get up every morning and do technical analysis and make money.
do you know what Schopenhauer's daily routine was?
No.
Similar to Kant's, where he was a fucking loser.
Kind of similar. I mean, he really was. I think when he was like when he was interested in philosophy in college, one of his professors told him he should only read Plato and Kant, and he actually only did that. Like, his philosophy is really not much more developed than like a Kantian type of philosophy, in my opinion.
If you don't know logic, Kant never saw the ocean. What did he live like? What, 2 miles away from it? He never saw it.
Oh yeah, I've heard that before. Good guy.
Fucking loser.
It's so sad to me. I could never, when I realized I had like this existential crisis when I was younger, when I realized that people live their entire lives without seeing the
Because he grew up white?
Buy it.
because I grew up by it. What the
I
fuck,
heard
you
white.
little shit?
I heard white.
Yeah, apparently Kant was
Oh my god, not Cage over here calling me a white girl.
like Kant lived
Why?
out
Because
his
white girls get
philosophy.
so tan.
His daily routine was super structured, and he never like orgasmed either. He thought it was irrational because he was like the guy that was like all about reason. So he actually lived that. Like he had his like servants, because he was like pretty rich. His servants like tuck him into bed a certain way every night to prevent him from like masturbating. That's actually true. And yeah, he was like addicted to coffee and stuff like that as well. Kant was like a weird guy. But yeah, Schopenhauer was pretty weird too. KJ, did you know? Schopenhauer lost a lawsuit for assaulting a woman. He pushed her down the stairs, and he had to pay her $75 a year for 5 years, and he hated it. And then when she died, I forgot what he wrote on her like death certificate, because they mailed him like a copy of her death certificate so that he could use to not have to pay her anymore.
What was it, like 60, 75 thalers or whatever the fuck?
A year, but he hated that he had to pay her anything. He tried fighting it in court because he had a lot of money. Yeah, Schopenhauer was a weird guy too.
Love that guy. He looked so angry all the time because of his hair and his like ugly mug.
Oh yeah, but when he was younger, he was pretty attractive. He had curly hair.
Was he really? I don't know.
Yeah, he had curly hair. But he aged pretty poorly. I agree.
The artist, philosopher himself. Fucking loser. I haven't even read much of his stuff because it's so like aesthetic based. That's probably why I don't like engage in aesthetic conversations though.
Yeah, his entire like The World Is Will, like that is literally all he ever wrote. Like everything else he wrote was just built, like not really ever building off those ideas.
What was his quote? What was his quote about will? He thinks that a mind. What was it? I think one can actualize their mind's envisionment by sheer force of will, or something like that.
I don't know that quote.
Something weird like that. He's an odd guy.
Yeah, I just know that he thinks the will is going to be like the noumena, like Kant's noumena. That's what he thinks it is. He's an idealist, but he doesn't think the will is subject to like the laws of the phenomena, which would be like the categories for Kant, so like causality, time and space. Those are just the laws that govern like the world of appearances, but the will isn't subject to that. It's literally copying Kant's philosophy. And I think the reason he uses the idea of the will and like just makes it like a pure idealist metaphysics is because he says that suffering is most fundamental. Like it has to be the case that there is only suffering. So the will is just constantly like driving into itself. It's like one way to think about it. It's constantly
like the will's satisfaction was impossible, or like the will rectifies itself somehow.
Yeah.
I don't know. I remember him talking about like hierarchy of graduations or something. Or gradations, fucking graduations.
The will can never be satisfied, though. Pretty like scary to think about.
Yeah, I've not read enough to like establish
the will, though. He thinks you can suspend the will only when you're looking at art. He thinks like aesthetics are like real. that's like a suspension of the will, because for like that moment you're not like desiring anything. You're not like, I don't really know how he puts it, but I kind of understand what he's saying. And also when you starve yourself, it's like the only two times when you can like suspend the will briefly.
Aimless, blind striving. Nice.
But like, what is it going towards? That's what I want to know. And maybe it's just like an infinite like nothingness.
I don't know. The nigga's dead, bro. He was known for like, probably you'd say, I don't know.
Fucking done.
He's pessimistic as hell. That's like the thing he was known for, is like Schopenhauer's pessimism. He's a fucking.
He wrote an
He just-
essay called On Women. Have you read that?
No, I've not read much of his work at all. I like briefly touched over his pessimism because Ava was yelling at me to read some continental thought on pessimism.
Oh yeah,
What?
he shits on women. And that's because his dad unalived himself, and then he was raised by his mom, and they hated each other. His mom always shit on his work when he was like writing and said it was terrible, and that he only ever wrote one book, and he's never gonna like be remembered. And they would like shit talk each other throughout their entire lives until she died. But she also like abused him.
No wonder she fucking hated paying her.
Yeah.
I hate something like that too.
And if you read Saint Augustine, the devout Catholic man, Confessions, where he tells his whole life of being a sinner, he loves his mom. He actually constantly talks about his mom in the Confessions. That's why I like him, because I love my mom too.
That was the most wholesome thing you've ever said to me, Clark.
Yeah, for real.
You know, I like you, despite like, you know, everything you kind of say and do sometimes. I think you're. Oh, I don't want to use this. I have a positive emotional response to you, Clark.
Me too. I have a positive subjunctive mood towards you.
Whoa, whoa, whoa! I don't know if it's a subjunctive mood. I don't know about that talk.
Yeah, because it's like alethic.
I don't think it's alethic. I don't think it's truth bearing at all.
There are no.
Is this what they call bromancing?
No, I've not said anything sexual about Clark.
Yeah, same.
This is so sweet.
Chris, what do you think about the view that nothing is true?
It's not a TikTok conversation, I've realized.
Mm.
No,
That
people
nothing
don't-
is true. Nothing is true.
People don't fucking.
I could see that perspective. I don't know if I necessarily agree with it, but I could see the perspective of it. What do you think about it, Clark?
Obviously, I mean, if you say nothing is true, then that has to be true. So it can't be true that nothing is true, because nothing is true if nothing is true. That's a problem.
Yeah, but other than the nothing being true and everything being false, then I could. Let me think about this. Yeah, I agree with you, Clark. I think.
Yeah, that statement would have to be true. This is why all these type
Exactly.
of these nihilist positions are going to be problematic, whether it be like metaphysical nihilism, epistemic nihilism, moral nihilism, alethic nihilism. Any like type of nihilist position has to discreetly reference the necessity of God in order for it to be possible. That's sort of my view. You're always discreetly referencing the necessity of God.
Well, what do you think about like? I don't know. Amdir sent it to me. Like Gemin's essays, "Something Is True," objection to Game Easter's paper.
Know what that paper? I don't know what that paper is.
Like Game Easter's or a series essay.
I've never read either of them.
No. Yeah, it's just I don't know. Game Easter is like this other guy who is probably known. Well, he's from Leeds, so England, and he's better well known for his logic like positions, and he's sort of the one that took Liggins' idea of epistemic nihilism, where Liggins denies like the justification requirement, and then Game Easter is like the truth requirement he finds to be absurd. But then this other guy came along named Jamin Asay from Hong Kong. Never spoken to him, don't even know who the fuck he is, but Amdir seems to like him, and he wrote a response paper, and his like whole goal was to establish that something can be true given any T schema, and then Game Easter is reportedly writing some response and gonna use some like, I don't know, descension or ascension function and like some conceptual engineering type shit where you can like, I don't know, make a distinction between plausibility and recommendability, or I don't know, something like that.
That's like really deep into the epistemology stuff for me. The furthest I've gone down that route would be like Duncan Pritchard with his like his book Epistemic Angst. I've like skimmed through that, and also the parts where he like lays out his theory of epistemological disjunctivism. But I've never looked at like any of the responses to the nihilist views or the anti-realist views. Like that's just anti-realist views. I usually only run like when people are like epistemic anti-realist and stuff. I don't go the whole like T schema route or like talk about like biconditionals and stuff because I don't really understand philosophy of language enough. So I usually just run like Jack Engstreich's like argument about like value externalism. It's like a companions and guilt argument though. Like I tie it into like the epistemic nihilist view. It's like obviously they have to concede that they're targeting moral reasons as well or like value relations, and then just say that like give Jack's critique against the value like internalist view because that would apply to like the epistemic nihilist as well. I think they'd be committed to a form of like value internalism given like the companions and guilt stuff, but that's probably really easy to understand. But that's the route that I go with it.
Yeah, it's a lot more intuitive to a lot of people than the way I have to fucking phrase it, because if you don't know if you don't even know what the Tarkis schema is or T schema, whatever, then it's kind of difficult to show the proof for it or the argument for it, evidence, whatever. I don't think I've read. I don't think I read Pritchard's book with epistemic angst.
He's trying to get around like the skepticism in epistemology in general. It's like
wasn't he like targeting? He was trying to like defang or like diffuse Cartesian skepticism or like maybe something like that. I don't fucking remember. That was like 2018, 2018, something like that.
Yeah. And I kind of like am sympathetic to like global skepticism in some sense, but yeah.
Oh yeah, you're an aren't you like? Isn't one of the views you like is idealism?
Yeah.
I guess. I don't really know much about ontology. I don't take many views on them, but I'm not
about epistemology, even though I should. It gets pretty deep. I read one like Michael Huemer paper and like Lawrence Bonjour talking about it. It was like pretty weird.
Dude, Huemer's an interesting fellow. I watched his debate with Lance a month ago or like 2 weeks ago, whatever it was. And I don't know, it seems like many of the like higher academics don't really talk all that much because Huemer gets on camera and he
they don't.
It's like 2 inches away from the screen and he's like, yeah, so anti-realism is incoherent, and like spends 20 minutes establishing why they're
literally just the basic like talking points. Like they never go like deeper. I don't know how to explain it, and I don't know. It's just I feel like they're just being safe. At least Huemer, he's always seems like he's just being safe.
Of course. And then his papers, he's like left hook, right hook, fuck you guys. It's like, whoa, where is this humor?
His papers are like insane. That's what I'm saying. Like I read one of his epistemology papers because he links them all for free on his website. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they were like insane.
Fucking strange dude. I used to call him Hosier Jr., but I've never spoken to Huemer. Most of my professors or anybody I've ever spoken to except like online or in my own time doesn't really associate themselves with controversial philosophers. They kind of want to like, I don't know, push you towards the staples. So it's a damn shame. But I'm going to go read or play chess more. I've been playing chess for like 20 minutes and I'm fucking dog shit at it. So yeah, love you, Clark. Love you, Logic. I'll talk to you tomorrow or sometime later.
Sick to talk to you, bro.
Of course, always a pleasure. Take care of yourself.
You as well. Well, with that, I think I might end the live, y'all. That was a really great start to my day. Thank you, everyone, for coming up, especially Cage, Chris, and Qualia, and Bear as well. Daddy Bear Eats Plants. Really great conversations, and I hope to talk to you guys soon. Much love.